Yeah, I'd like to call everybody into the room.
Yeah.
But just to make sure, it is channel 1. Hello? No, it's not working. Hello? Can you hear me? Oh, now, yes, I can hear myself. Okay. Can everyone please come in and take their seats? We are a little bit behind, and it's a very tight schedule with many fascinating speakers. Hello, Ambassador. Matthew, could you help bring everyone in? Good, okay. There are plenty more seats inside. We also have fans at your seat in case it's getting hot, because remember last year it was quite warm in this room, so please use them if you need them. I'll start as soon as I see Tao coming in. You always have stragglers. Tao? Okay. We're ready. I'd like to welcome everyone to the international headquarters of the International Commission on Missing Persons and to our roundtable event on missing and deported children, including those who were illegally deported to Russia. We have very important speakers who have joined us today. Many of them could also not come here, and they will be speaking online. I just also want to tell you that the event will be live streamed, so photographs are permissible. All of these things are okay. There will be a live stream audience. I also want to remind people that the headphones, for those of you who do not speak either English or Ukrainian, are available at the entrance, so please do pick them up, because this will be necessary throughout the conversation, because we're going to be switching between the languages. So channel 1 is for English, channel 2 is for Ukrainian. Also, there will be a question and answer session at the end of the roundtable discussion. So there will be 3 roundtable discussions. So questions will be reserved for the end. And those of you, to facilitate the process of asking questions and answering questions, you'll see on your seat that there is a sheet of paper with a QR code. And if you would be so kind as to type in your questions, that would greatly facilitate our ability to take your questions on board and to answer your questions. If you feel uncomfortable with that, we're also willing to do it the old-fashioned way and to have a microphone go out into the audience. My name, I should have said, is Catherine Baumberger, and I'm the Director General of ICMP. But there's somebody very, very important in this room, very dear to me, who I've known since 2001, who's ICMP's longest-standing commissioner, Her Majesty Queen Noor, who will be providing the welcoming speech. So without further ado, I would like to welcome her. Thank you, Your Majesty.
I will be brief, as there are far more important speakers who will be coming and giving perspectives that some of us can only imagine. But welcome to this roundtable on behalf of my fellow commissioners and myself. Today's discussion is the third in a series. The purpose of these meetings is to enhance Ukraine's long-term strategy to find tens of thousands of missing persons from the ongoing war and to secure the rights of all the hundreds of thousands of families, mainly women and children, searching for their loved ones. The first roundtable, as you may know, was held in Kyiv on the 29th of May. The second was held in Warsaw on the 12th and 13th of June and took the form of a technical workshop. Participants at the Kyiv meeting included Ukrainian ministries and institutions engaged in the missing persons process. They agreed on the pivotal role of a central database to assemble the wealth of missing persons data that is collected by different agencies, and they noted the need for regular coordination meetings. There was also consensus at the meeting on the need for constant communication with families of the missing, and the urgent need for an outreach campaign to collect genetic data from tens of thousands of family members residing inside and outside of Ukraine. Several speakers highlighted the fact that evidence from places where persons have gone missing or where unidentified human remains are buried must be collected in a manner that allows such evidence to be presented in court, perhaps years from now. This will support the effort to bring truth and justice to all families of the missing. It will support war crimes prosecutions, and it will support more general efforts to uphold the rule of law. The discussion in Warsaw brought together Ukrainian scientists and technical experts with some of the world's leading scientists. This discussion added clarity to ways in which strategy to find large numbers of missing persons can be supported by the latest forensic science and database technology. Today, we will examine the issue of children who have gone missing as a result of this tragic conflict, including those who were illegally deported, as you've just heard. Senior Ukrainian officials and representatives of civil society organizations have joined us online and in person, along with international technical experts. The discussion will be focused and practical, and it will be informed by the experience of those who are working day in and day out to account for the missing children in particular. I would like to highlight the fact that ICMP is working and has been for some decades across the world to account for missing persons, and strategies that have worked in one scenario might be adapted to work in another, and often are. As we know, the war in Gaza, like horrific conflicts elsewhere, has created an agonizing legacy of missing persons. And, as is the case with Ukraine, this legacy must be addressed if justice is to be served and if peace is to prevail. I believe we have in this room the experience and the expertise that can be turned into positive and practical solutions in Ukraine and around the world. I would like to thank the European Union and the governments of Canada, Czechia, Luxembourg, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, Slovakia, and the United States for the generous support they provide to ICMP's Ukraine program. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Majesty, for that very moving speech. I would now like to invite Ukraine's ambassador to the Netherlands, Ambassador Karasevich. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Your Majesty, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, friends. First of all, I would like really to full-heartedly thanks everyone, but first of all, organizers for this event, for this important discussion, because your work today will focus on one really critical issue, on exploring the ways to return missing Ukrainian children back home. And it's not just an issue, it is the tragedy for our Ukrainian people, for the whole country, because it's about children, it's about our kids. And almost all we do in our life is for our children. I'm just now reading one book of Ukrainian contemporary author, Alexander Michet, and it's about chronicles of the invasion. And it combines fiction but also interviews from real people. And one interview is of Ukrainian fighter who used to be neighbor of the author. He started this war, he joined this war in 2014. He was one of the team who were in Donetsk airport. And basically he finished his interview to Alexander Mikhail with his confession that he's not fighting for himself, but he's fighting for his kids. Because he said, all we are fighting in this war is for our kids, for their right to live in free and democratic state. That is why addressing this problem is fundamental for our country. And we are doing it now in a parallel way with literally fight against aggression per se. Yes, the scale of this Russian crime, it really strikes. Because you do know that Russians, they themselves claim that they've deported nearly 700,000 children from Ukraine to its territory. We do document in Ukraine almost 20,000 of such cases. And unfortunately, so far, only around 600 of these displaced, kidnapped kids have been returned and home and reunited with their families. We do know that after the deportation of Ukrainian children, occupants, they continue to commit illegal acts, illegal deeds. They are changing their nationality, they are transferring them to Russian families, they are rejecting their attempts to leave Russia, they are doing everything to indoctrinate them. And we see that this illegal deportation and also first Russification of kids, it's a part of genocidal policy against our people. And it's like deliberate ethnic cleansing and violation of the Convention of the Prevention of Crime of Genocide. So we are aware of the fact that the scale of the problem is really huge, and it frightens. But we also understand now, as we understood from the early months of the beginning of the full-fledged invasion, that we cannot just sit still and wait and do nothing. And so we started to act. We address this problem in different ways. We initiated, not we, but President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, initiated platform Bring Kids Back UA. International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children now includes all G7 countries and 37 states. Just recently, Argentina joined this format. This problem is a part of our peace formula, of the peace formula of President Zelensky. And its understanding also was reflected just a couple of days ago in joint communique adopted at the Global Peace Summit. And all who supported communique agreed that all deported and illegally displaced Ukrainian children and civilians must be returned to Ukraine. We're also working hard to ensure accountability for these crimes. And part of this work is developing here in The Hague. I'm quite sure that everyone present here is aware of the ICC arrest warrants against Putin and Lvova Belova for alleged war crimes of unlawful deportation of children. A lot of important stakeholders are involved: Ukrainian, foreign, international NGOs, international organizations, individual supporters, and everyone is doing her or his utmost to help these kids. Different activities are developing, political and visible and not visible but important and result-oriented. However, we do continue to work on every track. And one of such important tracks, our work on efficient system of collecting, sharing, and utilizing information that can lead to locating and identifying the missing and expand available resources and skills. And here we value the help of our partners, particular contribution of the ICMP. Cooperation with you is enhancing. DNA laboratories in The Hague, they are already used for different purposes in Ukraine. We do know that you expand trainings and technical support to Ukrainian partners. What is also important that you are establishing direct communication and cooperation with Ukrainian governmental stakeholders like Ministry of Health, Justice, and recent step was signing of the memorandum between ICMP and Ministry of Internal Affairs just last month, end of May. So with these united sources and united efforts, we will prevail, and I'm quite sure that we'll do utmost to return these kids back home. And let me thank you and wish everyone today really fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ambassador. And we are also excited, having come back from Kyiv just recently, having signed the agreement with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. That will definitely make things move faster, so thank you for that. Our final welcoming speech will be provided by Ambassador Svensson from Norway. Sadly, he'll be leaving us soon here in the Netherlands. We'll miss you greatly. We want to thank you for all the support you've given to ICMP. And as Her Majesty alluded to earlier, we have a number of governments contributing to our efforts, and we're honored to have Norway as part of that process. Please.
Your Majesty, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Russia's illegal and brutal war of aggression against Ukraine continues to shake the world. Russia's warfare keeps on having terrible consequences for the Ukrainian civilian population. Norway is a strong supporter of the Ukrainian people in their strive to protect and to safeguard Ukraine's statehood, territorial integrity, freedom, and democratically elected government. Norway seeks to facilitate efforts to find and to identify the many persons in Ukraine who have been killed or are missing, including children who have been forcefully taken to Russia. This is crucial for the affected families who live in constant distress and uncertainty about what has happened to their loved ones. These efforts are also a means of holding Russia accountable for its violations of international law in Ukraine. The International Commission on Missing Persons is renowned for its technical expertise and for its professionalism. The ICMP is very well suited and equipped to work on the matter of missing persons in Ukraine. It is, quite simply, the right organization in the right place at the right time in this context. Norway is proud to provide multi-year support for the ICMP's work to deliver justice and accountability for missing persons and their families. Under a 3-year program launched at the beginning of 2024, Norway is supporting the ICMP's efforts to increase the capacity of families and civil society organizations in Ukraine to gather and share information about the missing and to have agency to participate actively in the missing persons process. Norway also supports the ICMP's work with Ukrainian institutions to strengthen a dedicated mortuary system for effective criminal investigations and DNA-led human identifications, and to strengthen data collection and data management pertaining to missing persons. When tens of thousands of people are missing, hundreds of thousands of family members, neighbors, friends, and associates are directly affected. This is an issue that affects the whole of society. Norway's assistance to the ICMP in Ukraine is premised on restoring the international rule of law. Accounting for the missing is indeed an investment in justice and peace. Norway commends the ICMP on the tremendous work that you're doing, and we shall continue to stand with the people of Ukraine for as long as it takes. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ambassador, and for all your support. We've now concluded the welcoming speeches, and I would like to invite Andrei Kulikov, who will be the moderator and the panelist for the first panel session. Andrei is a very famous Ukrainian journalist and also the head of a commission on journalistic ethics. So welcome, Andrei, and he will welcome the panelists. Thank you.
I would like to begin with this discussion by standing. This is, I would like to pay respect to the commissioners of the ICMP. This is a sign of respect to this organization. This is a sign of respect to this team. This is a sign of respect to those who have joined this meeting. And this is a sign of respect who are following us online. We need to talk. And I didn't think, actually, that I would be so moved because I've been moderating many meetings in my lifetime. But I think that when we speak about thousands and hundred thousands of people and their fates, and when you see the scale, you remain speechless. We shall work without rounds of applauses. Let us save time. So I would like to invite Katerina Rashevska. She is the expert of the Regional Center for Human Rights. Also would like to invite Marianne Lambert. She is the co-founder and director of operations at Orphans Feeding Foundation. Also together with us, we are going to have Artur Dobroserdov, who is the Commissioner on Persons Missing Under Special Circumstances, and he is the head of the coordination activities between different state institutions that are dealing with the missing persons in Ukraine. Also, Evgenia Tkachenko is going to be with us. She's the president of all Ukrainian civil society organization Magnolia. This organization has been working in Ukraine since 2001. They're helping the national police in looking for missing children. And together with the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the activities of Magnolia have been enhanced and significantly. And also Mr. Kuleba is going to be together with us, who is the founder of the Safe Ukraine organization and also the former commissioner for children's rights in Ukraine. The Safe Ukraine, this is a network of organizations that are evacuating people from dangerous zones, territories, and they are also addressing the issue of returning deported children back to Ukraine from Russia. And I would like to ask the participants of this conversation to begin with a personal story, a personal touch. This could be your own personal story, or maybe a story that you know of. Because when I am thinking about my 4 grandchildren, I really do not want to start with a personal story that would mean that something bad has happened to my grandchildren, but we do not really want anything bad to happen to 30, 20, or even just one child happen. We need to speak the truth, but we need to see the scale as it is of this problem. So Artur Dobroserdov will be the first speaker to join us. Let me remind that Mr. Dobroserdov is the Commissioner on Persons Missing Under Special Circumstances. Artur, over to you. What is the scale of this problem? And what is the scale of the missing persons and children deported from Ukraine to Russia? And let me remind you that all of us have merely 7 minutes. Mr. Dobroserdov, over to you. Good morning.
I hope you can hear me well. Thank you so much for organizing this discussion. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I would like to start my speech with telling you that the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation has started on the 24th of February 2022. But we all understand that the Russian aggression, annexation of part of its territory, has started in 2014. As of now, as a consequence, we have a lot of people who have been killed, taken as prisoners, and gone missing. As of now, in the Unified Register of Missing Person, we have such people on the list. There are about 49 people like that, more than 2,000 people. This is information about non-identified bodies. More than 47,000 people. These are people who have disappeared during the occupation, during combat. As for 39,000, we are looking for these people. 7,000 people have been found. In the register, there are 2,145 people under 18 years of age. 147 1,147 male and 998 female. There are registered 1,726 have been registered. 413 children have been identified. Among the people missing, there are people who have children who have special status. So these are orphans or people without parental care. These are children that lived in orphanages, family-type houses before the war. In order for the child to be gone missing, it is necessary to file a complaint about this missing person to the police or a special prosecution service, and then a criminal proceeding starts based on the fact of missing of such person. We must understand that responsibility for children usually falls on the parents, but the state also plays a pivotal role in this process, especially when we are talking about children with this status who do not have relatives to take care of them except for the state and relevant law enforcement agencies. I would like to tell you that the term deported people and missing people, they are not synonyms. Because collection of data and verification of data in relation to people who have been deported or forcibly transferred to the Russian Federation is carried out by the Ministry of Reintegration of the occupied territories of Ukraine. Information about deported children are filled in the Unified Register of Missing People, including children who have been forcibly displaced or deported by the Russian Federation of the territory of Ukraine. The owner of this register is Ukrainian National Center of Peace Building, which plays the role of the National Information Bureau. Based on the data that we receive from this bureau, as of now, we know about 23,771 children who were deported on the territory of the Russian Federation. As of now, on the territory which is not controlled, which is controlled by the government of Ukraine, part of the children were given back. 2,300 children were identified, and the destiny of more than 20,000 children is not known. As for the deported children and displaced children, in addition to the institutions that I represent, there are other agencies taking part in it, the coordination headquarters on prisoners of war, the General Prosecutor Office, the Police of Ukraine, the Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine, and the Commissioner on Human Rights in Ukraine. As for the agencies related to looking for missing children, they make actions and use measures to identify and find those people. It is necessary to mention that we shall be grateful to civil society organizations and a lot of foundations that do their best to bring those children back. They carry out special operations to bring children back. They collect and find important information to identify the whereabouts of those children. I would like to thank Evgenia Tkachenko, president of civil society organization Magnolia, and Mykola Kuleba, founder of Save Ukraine charity organization. The number of children that are victims of this war depends on the region of Ukraine where they used to live before the start of the full-scale invasion. Such critically important oblasts are unfortunately Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and other oblasts. In these regions, there are a lot of children that were deported or displaced, and they are the most vulnerable part of our population, and at the same time, they are the future of our nation. As for the motivation of deporting those children of the territory of the Russian Federation, there are the following. So first, this is a genocide of the Ukrainian nation and forced deportation of such children, making them complain about Ukraine or find reasons for the Russian aggression of the territory of Ukraine. I am really grateful to all of you for being able to discuss all these questions at such a high level. I'm really grateful for having such a team that is that consists of international organizations as well as of civil society organizations and government agencies from Ukraine that work in this direction. If you have questions to me, I will be happy to answer them. Thank you so much, Arturo. So my question is the following. You have been working on that starting from March. How not your attitude, but how your feelings, your emotions changed to these topics since you started working at this position. We have been working in this area since September 2023. When we started doing this, we almost had no information about children gone missing. Right now, we know the key players who take part in collecting this information. Who is responsible for what? We understand the scale of this problem, and it is a terrible feeling. This is our future. We need to do our best to bring those children back. We understand that with time passing, a lot changes. Even names and last names of these children change, and the aggressor country does its best to make these children forget their roots, forget their relatives. That is why we need to continue our efforts. Thank you so much, dear Artur. We will have more questions in the end of the conference. And now let us proceed to Katarina Rashevska. Let me tell you that Katarina Rashevska is a human rights defender. She works at the Regional Center for Human Rights, and her work is aimed at supporting human rights. By the way, this organization was founded in 2013 in Crimea, and after the illegal annexation and occupation of the Crimea, they relocated to Kyiv. Mr. Dobrosedov told us about the scale of this problem. He made us understand about the regions where this problem is the most relevant, but how the consequences of deportation of these children are qualified at the legal level in the context of the conflict, and what are violations of human rights related to this problem have you documented. Thank you so much, Andrei, dear commissioners, dear guests of this conference. I would like to start with a story. So Serhiy first suffered because of the Russian Federation when he was 9 years old. He had a mine explosion and he partly lost his eyesight. When he was 16, he was a victim once again, but he was a victim of the Russian deportation. He was forcibly deported on the territory of the Moscow region, where he was transferred to an adopted family. And then the process of Russification started, and they used all the attributes such as the following. He was forced to attend Orthodox church service. He was taken away his document, his passport, and his mobile phone was equipped with a special application to follow his location so he doesn't run away. Fortunately, the boy managed to leave the territory of the Russian Federation, to leave behind his family, and he was one of the first children in 2022 who was brought back to Ukraine. After that, his adoptive family from Russia has been calling him, writing to him, begging him to go back because they would have problems in Russia. It is a quote. I told you this story not because it's unique, but because it's not unique. Unfortunately, deportation never happens in isolation from other violations on children's rights which are committed during conflict. And when this child is under Russian control, it is always related to imposing on him and her Russification, Russian citizenship, including them into Russian system in formal and formal education with elements of political indoctrination. This is also about militarization. The Russians, on the initiative of Putin and under the leadership of his advisor, Mr. Kiriyenko, they have created militarized center of military education for children on the occupied territories. Children are trained using the same methodologies that Russian soldiers also use. Unfortunately, those children with special status are the most vulnerable. My colleague Artur has mentioned these children. These are children without parental care and orphans. According to the government, there are about 4,000 children with that status. Such children are deported by the Russian Federation or their own territory, or they are displaced within the occupied territories of Ukraine. They are also imposed Russian citizenship, and according to our information, this process has ended. And then these children are part of the federal database of orphans in Russia, which make them eligible for adoption or foster care. And you know that Maria Lvova-Belova, the Commissioner on Human Rights and Children's Rights in Russia, insists on that. And recently we have documented 380 cases of such foster care, and there are several dozen cases of adoption of such children in Russia. As for the adoption, this process is also related to the process of changing personal data. But I would like to say that even the fact that these children are in the database distorts information about their personal data. So their national roots are changed. For example, a child from Kherson Oblast is mentioned as a child from Bryansk, Kursk, Rostov, or any other oblast of the Russian Federation where this person is located at the moment of registration in the database. And of course, it makes identification and bringing back those children much more difficult. Russians have deported our children into 58 cities and villages to the Russian Federation, as well as on the territory of Belarus, as well on the territory of Southern Ossetia, and on the occupied territories of Ukraine. Of course, this process is also related to mass violations of children's rights, and I can tell you about many articles of the Convention of Children's Rights that have been violated. Article number 8, violating the right on identity, which is one of the preconditions for providing other rights of a child. These rights have been violated. The right to family, not only within the context that children are taken away from the family context, but also within the situation that they cannot be taken back from these Russian families. And we are talking not only about violations of children's rights, but about war crime, about the delay of repatriation of these children. There is also the violation of the right to education within this context of indoctrination and education, the violation of the right to use their own national identity, their own national language, because they are punished because they continue speaking their own language. They use Ukrainian symbols and they try to continue education in Ukrainian schools online. The scope of those violations is so great, is so large, and the consequences are so negative that the experts of the Moscow mechanism in their report highlight that it can be qualified as torture or inhuman treatment towards these children. Dear Katerina, thank you so much. The situation is clear, but what are the leverage and mechanisms that we can use to prevent the situation and to punish the perpetrators? I would like to quote the experience of my organization to prove what are the efforts of our NGOs and international NGOs that they implement as part of the international coalition on bringing back Ukrainian children. Regional Center on Children's Rights has submitted 3 notifications to the International Criminal Court on this delay of repatriation as war crime, violations of children's rights as war crime, as well as forced transfer of children into Russian families. We also referred to the UN Committee on the Rights of Children, and we have positive opinions of this institution in terms of indoctrination and militarization on behalf of the Russian authorities towards Ukrainian children. We have also reached out to the UN Committee on Racial Discrimination because this agency is aimed at preventing the crime of genocide. We're also trying to advocate and to start the process of bringing back those children, and we try to engage as many stakeholders as we can. We are grateful to the EU countries, to the United States of America, to Canada and other countries for their participation. And we're also grateful to the countries of the Global South. For them, it's not so black and white sometimes, and Russian propaganda plays a big role there. But when we are united, we are stronger together, because unfortunately they also have this experience of children being stolen and children being reintegrated later after coming back to their own country. We also try to bring those responsible into justice, and we see that sanctions might be efficient. We are grateful to the EU countries for their contribution into this process, and they also add to the all-European sanction list those people who are responsible for deporting and displacing Ukrainian children. Thank you so much, Katerina. It is great to see that you not only see the problem, but you are also doing your best to try to find a solution. So in this context, the NGO Magnolia has a lot of experience. Yevgenia Tkachenko, the president of this organization, is with us. She shall be with us online. So while we are waiting for you to connect, yes, we can see you here. We are happy to see you here. We are really grateful to you for the hard work that your organization carries out since 2001 by finding missing children. But of course, since the start of the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation, your activities have even increased. So what are the new challenges that you confront now, that you face now, after the start of Russia's full-scale invasion? And which category of children do you consider to be the most difficult to search for? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It is true, our organization, Magnolia, has a lot of experience of searching for missing children. We have been working in this area for more than 20 years, and it seemed to us that we know everything about this topic. But it turned out that February 2022 has brought new challenges and new problems that hadn't been expected. We hadn't had such experience, and probably no other country in the world had this experience. The first challenge that we faced is a sharp increase of missing children on the territory of the European Union. Since the first start of the full-scale invasion, for women and children who, in panic, were fleeing Ukraine to the European countries. There was a simplified procedure of crossing the border between Ukraine and the European countries. As a result of that, a lot of children were crossing the border with the European Union, not accompanied by their relatives, by adults. They were crossing the border with other people, with other adults. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, we started receiving a lot of notifications where people asked us to find their children on the territory of the European Union. We received 157 such notifications in the first days after the full-scale invasion about missing children on the territory of the EU. Our organization is a member of the International Federation Missing Children Europe, and our colleagues from all the countries of the European Union started looking for our children all over Europe, all over the world. As of now, we have only 12 missing children who are still missing on the territory of the European Union, but I'm totally persuaded that we'll be able to find them in good health. Another challenge that we face, this is a category of missing children on the territory of the combat actions and on the temporarily occupied territories.
As of today, we have 1,981 cases launched on looking for a missing child in the temporarily occupied territories or in the combat zone. The third challenge, and the most horrible challenge, and the largest challenge, is the many cases of deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. The absolute majority of Ukrainian children have been taken to places we do not know of. So, from our point of view, those children are missing with not any information about them. So currently we have 9,546 children, the whereabouts of whose are not known to us. So those are the three categories of children, those are the three categories of challenges that we are facing as the Magnolia organization. We are trying to find these children. Yes, please. And what are the ways of making progress in solving these problems? Thank you. I would like to address the attention of ICMP on the following. Within the 1,981 cases of searching for children who are currently in the temporarily occupied territories, we need to single out those children who disappeared in the first days of the war in the Donetsk region, and specifically in the city of Mariupol. According to our indirect information, and our experience shows that at least 100 of them, those are the so-called tragic cases, which means that most probably those children died and their bodies have not been identified. But we're sure that the time will come when we shall be victorious, when we shall liberate the city of Mariupol, and then we'll start the identification of those missing children, especially those children who went missing in the first months of the war in the cities that were bombed and shelled. That's a very difficult category to work with. The second category, it's not only the 9,546 children deported, but specifically those children who until that time will have been adopted in line with the laws of the Russian Federation. They have the clause of confidentiality applied to the adoption cases. So as soon as the Russian citizens adopt a child, they have the right to change the name, to change the surname, and they have the right to change other key information, and they have the right not to disclose such information to anyone. So I'm sure that once we win, and once we have this possibility as Ukraine to return children back to Ukraine, then that will be the group of children that until that time will have been already adopted in the Russian families. And then to present evidence of the biological origin of such a child could be done only and exclusively on the basis of the DNA identification. And that is why we need the support and help by the ICMP. So there's two groups of children that I would like to focus our attention on. And you have made the point. Thank you very much. Indeed, you have very well outlined the role that could be played by the International Commission for the Missing Persons, and they want to do it. Katarina Rashevska spoke about the so-called status children and their fates. That is the problems that we are and the problems we're facing with that group of children. So what do you think of this category of children? And how successful have you been with these children? Those are the children who do not have any family given to them, or those are the so-called institutionalized children. Thank you. So we have children from the biological families. And then we also have the status children, that is the children from the institutions. But their identification is done by the same way, because they were born in Ukraine. They were not born on the moon, which means that those children do have biological parents or relatives in Ukraine, which means that already now, as we're still waiting for our victory and we're still waiting for a possibility to return those children, but every year we need to launch an informational advocacy campaign in Ukraine. We need to explain to the citizens of Ukraine the necessity to give their DNA reference material so that at a later stage there would be a possibility of identifying children and returning them back. Thus, such campaign is necessary, and I'm counting on a good partnership with the ICMP on running such an awareness-raising campaign. We need to prepare for this campaign, and we need to inform the stakeholders. We need to keep on saying that this is something that needs to be done. We should not wait with this until the day of victory. Thank you very much. Indeed, many people just like you, many of us here in this room are not waiting, and we're doing everything we can to do our work properly. And indeed, it's good that you have voiced some specific proposals and suggestions. I know many people at the ICMP and the ICMP. Sorry, I'm probably mixed up with the abbreviation in the Ukrainian language. Anyway, undoubtedly, this is the topic they're already discussing. Indeed, those children were born not on the moon. They were born in Ukraine. When we go to another country, then we might think maybe there is nothing different. But it turns out that in other countries we have not only different trees but also people. Now let's move on to Mariam Lambert. Maria Lambert used to work in many different countries, and since 2022 she has been very active in Ukraine directly. Her organization, Orphans Feeding Foundation, is making sure that Ukraine is not turning into a burn-out space like the moon. So how does the Orphans Feeding Foundation assisting in efforts to reunite missing children with their families or caregivers? Because those children were born in Ukraine, which means they're probably going to live in Ukraine as well. Mariam, over to you.
Hello. My name is Sveltana. I'm from Melitopol, the city which was invaded in February 2022. My son, Sasha, is 16 years old, and I would like to ask you all for your help. I've been looking for Sasha for days. Just after the occupation, myself and my son, we resisted not to get a Russian passport. We resisted not to be deported to another city, occupied territories of Russia. We resisted so much that we were under surveillance. A few days later, after we refused to get a Russian passport, my son and the surveillance went for a bike ride. He never came back. He never came back, and I was looking for him for days and days. I decided to go to the police station, which is, by the way, under the Russian Federation. I asked them about my son. They said that they will do everything to find him back. A few hours later, they came to my house. They destroyed the bedroom of my son. They took everything to look for him. It never happened. However, a few hours later, I received a phone call, and they asked me to come back to the police station. They congratulate me. They were happy. They found my son. However, they told me that I cannot get my son back because he's been detained. What happened during that day is that when he went for a bike ride, 2 men from the FSB agent took him. I received this testimony from the neighbors who were afraid to speak up. They took him, they were armed, and they bring him to the police station. The day I met my son at the police station, I couldn't recognize him. He was bruised all over the place. I couldn't recognize him because he was bruised by the shock, the electrical shock he was getting every single hours. In order to testify, they wanted him to testify that indeed he tried to assassinate Russian officials, which wasn't true. As you can imagine, my name is not Svetlana, my son is not Sasha. I'm Mariam, I'm Belgium, living in the Netherlands. But this is how my morning starts every day, every evening. I'm a mother of 3 children. And when those parents are asking for help, are telling you in different channels because they are still under occupation, they are scared from themselves, they are scared for their child who is still under detention. But this is how we work every day. Our organization has been working in Ukraine, and myself personally, since March 2022, in the occupied territories and frontline villages, and delivering humanitarian aid, evacuating civilians with local NGOs. And in June 2023, together with my colleagues, we decided to partner with Bring Kids Back, Presidential Office, Ombudsman, and my colleague in Ukraine in order to see what can be done to return children who are deported. So together with Bring Kids Back team, our NGO was involved in returning the children who were under the mediation of Qatar, providing them with logistic and helping them. And I witnessed this reunion. I witnessed this reunion with children and mothers. And again, my brain, my soul, my heart is not trained to witness this horrific situation. Our NGO is working on 3 aspects. As you can understand, the children deportation is extremely complex. All politicians, government alone will not be able to do that. NGO, civil society alone will not be able to do that. Lawyers alone will not be able to do that. This is why those 3 aspects are very important to consider. The first aspect, humanitarian, which I just described. The second aspect is political. So when you have cases like Svetlana, we don't ask people to find their son back. She knows where he is. She has been calling international lawyers, Russian lawyers. There was absolutely nothing they could do for them. And they told them, whatever we do, your son will be detained anyway because it's a fake case. And they're doing that to show to the other children who are still living under occupation. They want to prevent those children to resist from getting a Russian passport. This is why there is nothing they can do. This is why our NGO is actually playing a role as a backdoor channel, and we've been visiting many countries who are actually part of the BRICS countries, because we believe that for those difficult cases, those countries are helping. They are helping, but it's not visible. They are helping because every day, today, when you shake hands, you meet someone, you need to post it on social media every second. But those people, they have also relation with the Russian Federation. And this is the reason why we are using them. It's to be able to put pressure in order to work on those extremely difficult cases where we know where they are, we know who are the parents, but it will be impossible to return them. The third aspect is the legal aspect. We've been working for months and months and months on the identification of the people who were involved in the deportation. Because it's not an accident. It's not an incident that some children were deported, some children were not deported. You mentioned in your speech in another country that those children are targeted. It was prepared before the war. They are targeted. This is why in those lists that we have provided to the EU, you can see lawyers, nurses, teachers, doctors, officials, all of them were involved in deportation. So the list of sanctions hopefully will at least put pressure in order to stop this deportation. What can we do when we are looking for children, trying to identify those children, try to reunite them with the parents? What can we do as well is the preventive deportation. We are not talking about that a lot, but all those mandatory evacuations are extremely crucial. We need to ensure and to convince those families who are still staying in those frontline villages that if they don't get evacuated, those children will be deported. 2 months ago, I was in Kupiansk. There was a mandatory evacuation. The city was empty. They told me there is no one left, but I received calls from people who are still there. They needed humanitarian aid. So we use the fact that we are providing humanitarian aid to actually convince the people to leave Kupiansk. When I arrived there was 350 civilians, and then 75 children were there. And doing evacuation today is different from February, because I didn't know about deportation. But when I was there 2 months ago, I looked at the children, and there was a 12-month-old baby. And I knew that that child will be deported if she's not living. And that's why, all of you, it's not only about looking for children, all of us together, politicians, government, lawyers, civil society, we need to work together. We can prevent deportation, we cannot stop it. Because when the Russians think that they are living under the international law, the International Criminal Court, they believe that it doesn't apply to them. This is the moment in history that we need to be creative and sit all together in order to do our best, not only to return those children, but to prevent further deportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mariam. I will have more questions to all the participants of this panel discussion, and we will revisit what has just been said by Katerina and by Mariam. But I would like to address Mykola Kuleba now. He is the founder of the Save Ukraine charity organization. Mykola, you know, there are questions about the challenges in locating children and also extracting those children from the temporarily occupied territories. But Mykola, please start with some successful story where you actually made it, where you were able to save someone. And once you present a story of success, let us think what needs to be done next. Thank you very much. Mykola, over to you. Yes, thank you. Colleagues, friends, this is a very important discussion, and it is of immense significance for the future of Ukraine. I would like to share with you our experience. Let me begin with a story. And just a few words about the Save Ukraine network. This is a network of many different organizations. Since 2014, we have been helping families and children who had suffered from the war. We managed to evacuate more than 100,000 people from combat zone territories. In particular, we are very careful about the Ukrainian children that were taken into Russia or stay in the temporarily occupied territories. So we have returned 384 children, of which 92 children are orphans. Now a story. Rostislav Lavrov is a small boy from the occupied territory of Ukraine. He was abducted by the Russian soldiers during the war, and he was forcibly deported to Russia. He used to live in Kherson area together with his grandmother. After the beginning of the occupation, the grandmother died, so the boy was left alone. One day, the military came, entered his house. They forcibly took the boy together with a number of other local children, and they were taken to Crimea. They were kept there in a camp for a period of 5 months. The sanitary conditions were poor. There was no medical care. There was bad nutrition. They were subjected to abuse, and they were forced to resign from the Ukrainian citizenship and to adopt the Russian citizenship. For being stubborn, he was many times taken to the isolation room with no window, with no communication. He had spent more than 2 weeks alone in such an isolation chamber. Then he was sent to a military academy. He spent a lot of time at the military academy. Then he found us. We tried several times to extract him, but we failed. Nonetheless, eventually we were capable of returning the boy. He needed rehabilitation as he had undergone through immense stress and trauma. We had provided him with medical and psychological care. Another story is a girl, Ilona, 17 years old. She addressed us with a plea to help her to return. She used to live in Bereslav, that is in the Kherson region. After the occupation, the military entered her house. They interrogated the girl because they found out that her brother serves in the armed forces of Ukraine. The girl was telling us that she had to handle a hand grenade unsecured, and a barrel was placed right against her head. She was deported on 2 occasions. First, she was taken to a camp in Crimea, and 1 month later, she was taken to another camp, but now in the territory of the Russian Federation.
The military asked this girl to say that she is already 18 years old, though she was 16, and they even issued a new passport that said that she was 18 years old. Then she was taken on the territory of Krasnodarsky Krai, where she was forced to work in the shop to be able to buy herself some food. Ilona really wanted to go back to Ukraine, and when on our side everything was planned to take her back, Russian special servicemen came to her, interrogated her, and took mobile phone away from her. In such a way, we lost connection with her. During all this time, Ilona wanted to go back to Ukraine, and she earned money to buy a new phone to get in touch with us. And finally, she succeeded. She got in touch with us, and we managed to bring her back to Ukraine through Belarus border. She hasn't seen no one from her family during 2 years. In this story, we have one more important question that I would like to address to all of you. In Belarus, Ilona was forced to go and get a Ukrainian document, a certificate to get back to Ukraine in Belarus Red Cross Society. So this is exactly the Red Cross Society, an organization that took part many times in deportation of Ukrainian children, and it was even recognized at the level of the head of the Red Cross. So this is the Red Cross that implements the orders of the criminal authorities of the Russian Federation. They work for the criminal Kremlin regime, and they decide who decides whether to get those children back or not. We have to identify what it is. Is it a crime, or is it facilitating a war crime? In our work, we confront a lot of challenges. They are not only related to the search of children, including communication with those children and returning them back. It is very difficult to search for orphans, those children that were taken from different state institutions or from foster families. Our team of investigators is looking for these children using open and closed data. We identify their location and we document their whereabouts. It's very difficult to find those children that have been placed into Russian families or in Russian institutions for children. It's almost impossible to find them and to bring them back. As soon as we start talking to these children using social media, as soon as we start talking about returning to Ukraine, we understand and we document that there is an adult starts talking to us in social media, and we are quite sure that this is a representative of the Russian Special Service. So, in fact, these children are imprisoned in captivity of the Russian authorities, and most of them are afraid to go back to the Ukrainian territory. They are afraid to pass through the checkpoints because they know the stories about those families that were just killed by Russian occupiers at the checkpoints. Russians tell our children that they won't be able to go back, and then in Ukraine they will be punished by the Nazis. So when talking to those children, we want to tell them the truth. We want them to be sure that they can go back safe and secure in Ukraine. And we want them to understand that they will be able to go back to Ukraine and to rebuild their life in Ukraine. In our experience, such negotiations with children might last for about 6 months before the child really has some trust in us and agrees to go back. Another problem that we often face when trying to bring those children back is problems with the IDs, with the documents. Very often not to let those children out of Russia or of the occupied territories. Representatives of different Russian institutions require them to present different documents, and we lose a lot of time on those artificial bureaucratic barriers created by the Russians. This is one example. For one children, Russians required a certificate which had to be issued by the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine, stating that the mother is not deprived of her maternal rights. So they require this certificate from the real mother of the child. And there are a lot of cases like that. Mr. Kuleba, you have 1 minute left. Last but not least, about the logistics, because when it comes to each and every child, we have to draft a special action plan to understand where we might have some challenges. We try to plan the route of bringing such children back using volunteers and using our allies. There were cases when those volunteers were arrested. Those people who helped those children were interrogated, were tortured, and were blamed in deporting those children or even killing those children. And I would like to say that we have a network of our centers, more 1,000 people, most of them children. These are people that are subject for rehabilitation. We call on you, we urge all of you to get together, to unite, to help us find those children and to bring those children back, because they are actually held in captivity by Russia. Thank you so much, Mykola. So Mr. Kuleba said that we need to build this confidence within children so they decide to go back. So we need to, we see that the children have their own rights. So the last question to all of you, to all of our panelists, what shall we do on the free territory of Ukraine so this confidence is still within these children? Mykola Kuleba. Thank you so much for the question. So first, I think we need to adopt a special program for rehabilitation and reintegration of these children. And we need to support those families, our reunification with children, especially for orphans and for children in foster care. We need to provide them with all support so children and their families understand that we care about them, that they are taken good care of, that they are expected, so they can be reintegrated. I know that it's very difficult to do, but we need to do our best. Evgenia Tkachenko, 30 seconds to you. So I have nothing to add to what Mykola has said. I fully agree with him. So we give it over to Maryam. Thank you.
Well, exactly what we need to do is actually ask ourselves a question. Today, we have identified a certain numbers of children, and with those children, we need to allocate amongst orphans. Do we have a family in place? Yes or no? How much does it cost to return a child? Yes or no? How much does it cost to provide them with a house? I don't like to talk about rehabilitation, but that's another debate, because those children need to be readapted into the into the society, and not just put up aside. And one last thing is that if we can't answer those questions, then it's a difficult time to provide them with the necessity and the trust that we will give them.
Artur Dobroserdo, over to you. Yes, of course, this is a question of motivation for these children with special status. What they will be confronted with when they go back. The Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine has adopted a resolution about the procedure of bringing deported children back. The question is about their social security, about conditions for them, social protection of such children who were transferred back shall be carried out according to the state procedures. Thank you so much. Thank you that social security is also important. So we need to provide concrete answers to all these questions. What is rehabilitation? We need explanation. What is reintegration? And the individual formula that Mr. Artur has mentioned is important, but without this general procedure, we won't be able to do that. We need to have all regulations in place. And last but not least, we have to adopt a program of urgent reparations, how it was done for the victims of sexual violence, conflict-related sexual violence. So we have to do the same for our children, because they won't be children all the time. They will become adults, and they need these programs right now. Of course, such program won't be created without people as you, without such people that we see among us in this hall, without those people who are with us online. All of us shall spread information about our problem, about our deported children, and about how we plan to solve this problem. Thank you so much. This is the end of our first panel. Ten-minute break, and then we'll proceed to our second panel. Thank you.
I don't think it'll go over, yeah.
Please. Okay.
Sarah, so this is it. So Probuskina, it's
Could you
Elizabeth, I guess, you know.
test talking in the microphone?
Hello?
Hello? Hello? Okay, sorry. Okay. Our 10 minutes is over. Could everyone please come back in and take their seats again? We're about to begin the next panel discussion. If you can hear me, please come back in. Because this is one, and then we'll have one more. So we have a ways to go. This is a very important topic with many, many important speakers. So please take your seats again. So this is our second panel discussion, and the moderator for this discussion is a dear friend of ICMP's. We've known her a long, long time, Sarah Houston, who's now with Northwestern University, and also spearheads this initiative called DNA Bridge. So without further ado, please, Sarah.
Thank you. I want to extend my warmest thanks to the ICMP, to Andreas and Catherine, and many of the other folk here that have helped to coordinate this, Kevin especially, this event today. I'm research professor of pediatrics at Northwestern and Lurie Children's Hospital, and my research interests are in how to ethically apply DNA data in humanitarian and human rights contexts. And the one we are talking about today is one of the most difficult and challenging ones I've seen, but it's also the first global opportunity to apply DNA technology and other technologies to assist and aid and work together to try to address the problem, both in the short term and in the long term missing. I'm also co-founder and president and acting executive director of DNA Bridge, which is a civil society organization that formed specifically for this purpose. We don't have funding, it's a very small group, but it's a coalition of the willing as we try to make a difference in developing strategies. I'm honored to host this panel today with today's tragedy of the Ukrainian children who have been separated from their families and from their cultural identity. We see this first global opportunity to adapt what are already DNA-led protocols designed for victim identification to assist families of living missing children. With this panel, I'm excited to hear from these experts on how best to harness technologies to locate the missing children, expedite reunifications, and develop a long-term resource of DNA profiles of the relatives of the missing children, all while ensuring safeguards and collaboration to protect or to prevent the misappropriation of sensitive data about these children. So I'm first want to introduce Liz Barner, who is a Cuban-American pediatrician and associate professor of pediatrics at UCLA. She is also one of the 3 co-founders of DNA Bridge alongside me and Diana Madden, who's in the audience. Her research focuses on children affected by violence, family separation, and incarceration grounded in human rights and social actions. She is also the author of the book Reunion, which is about finding the disappeared children of El Salvador. This book is based on 15 years of ethnographic fieldwork with Probúsqueda, a civil society organization in El Salvador that's dedicated to searching for the several thousand children separated from their families during the Salvadoran conflict that lasted from 1980 to 1992. So Liz, I first wanted to ask, what are the lessons that Probúsqueda can provide, or the experience from Probúsqueda that can be applied that are applicable to addressing the issues in the context of the invasion of Ukraine?
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Okay. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you to the ICMP for hosting us, and I'm also honored to speak on behalf of Probúsqueda. Just very briefly, Asociación Probúsqueda de Niñas y Niños Desaparecidos, Association for the Search of the Disappeared Girls and Boys, is a human rights organization based in El Salvador, founded in 1994, 2 years after the peace accords. The organization works to find the children disappeared because of the war. Children became separated from their families for numerous reasons, including babies being taken from their mother's arms at gunpoint, or young children getting lost from their families in the chaos of war as they were fleeing military raids. The methods for finding the children that Probusketa used is witness interviews, corroborating evidence such as adoption records, and then the use of DNA, which I became involved with, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. And just to understand the context, Probusketa has a little over 1,000 cases registered. 500 of the cases have been solved, and 500 remain unsolved. My role was as a participant observer, starting when I was a medical student. I participated in the family reunions, and I helped to create a DNA bank, and then did formal research interviews with the families and gathered ethnographic field notes. So what did I learn from this work? The people at Probusketa are it's an amazing community, and I speak to you very humbly because I know very little about the context in Ukraine, but I will do my best to transmit applicable lessons from El Salvador. So the first lesson is that separation, I think we all know and we can feel it, it's intensely difficult, the pain of an ambiguous loss. But I think what people also need to understand is that reunion is beautiful. It's one of the most potent things I've ever witnessed, and it's also quite painful. In that moment, families relive the trauma of the separation. And then the longer-term reintegration process is difficult, and families need psychosocial support throughout this process. And they also go through distinct patterns, the patterns that match commonalities with other settings. And so there is directed approaches that can be used to support families. And that was a very important part of what Probusketa did and helped to build community among the disappeared children and their families. The second lesson I would like to offer is that the right to identity is central to this work. I know this was brought up in panel 1. As Father John Cortina, the founder of Probusketa, explained to me, Probusketa's mission is to search until every child separated from their family is found. And that is so that the children can know the truth of their history and have the opportunity to reunite. Honestly, it took me years to understand the wisdom of that mission and of Father John's words, and so I would like to offer those to you. The third lesson for me is that DNA is a valuable tool that can be used through a database approach. So in terms of disclosures, I get no funding from DNA organizations. I did not expect to see myself 20 years later talking about the power of DNA, but it's because I've witnessed it. I've witnessed what it means for families. In terms of what the value of DNA, I've seen as young people were struggling to reintegrate and accept their relationships with their biological families who they'd been separated from at least 10 years at the time that they reconnected. As one young woman said, DNA doesn't lie. Having that DNA verification really helped them to accept the relationship. The second value of DNA is the possibility of cold hit matches. So that's having a match through a DNA database, having people reconnected, that without the means of DNA, they never would have been together again. So there's an example through Probusketa of a young man who was raised in a military family, and then he went to Probusketa and said, I want to search. And he gave a DNA sample, and his DNA matched with a family in the database. But that family in the database was searching for disappeared girls, not boys. And so Probusketa went to that family and said, is it possible that you might have a son that was missing also? And the family explained the mother was killed holding a baby, and we assumed that that baby had died. So DNA can create cold hit matches.
So, sorry, we're short on time, so let me also ask you, how important is collaboration with local communities, international organizations, and government agencies in this effort?
So I think the key is to work closely with communities to know what the communities want, to listen very carefully to the families and to the disappeared children. And I mean this both when we're organizing the movement to find the disappeared children. Really, I think that's why Pro Búsqueda was so effective, is because it was founded by the mothers of the disappeared and run by the families of the disappeared. And then even when navigating every single reunification process, to really let it be driven by what the family wants and what the young people want. So I think the work of the local civil society organizations to work closely with the families and earn their trust is key. International partnerships are also really important. El Salvador, the work without the forensic genetics really relied on the technical expertise provided through Physicians for Human Rights and the UC Berkeley Human Rights Center. And also with intergovernmental organizations like the ICMP that can provide the data safeguarding. We really need a global infrastructure for protocols on family reunification. And government cooperation also, it's not something that Pro Búsqueda had. The government actually actively tried to sabotage their work. But I think there's immense opportunities with the government of Ukraine potentially being a partner in the process.
I'll come back to you with some more questions, but if we have the time. But I would like to introduce Adnan Rizvit at the end of the stage today. He's the Director of Data Systems and Data Coordination at the ICMP. His responsibilities include developing and implementing data collection strategies, which are very impressive because I've seen the tours, establishing global data sharing and analysis mechanisms. He's overseen the development of the ICMP's online inquiry center, an open access interactive tool. Can I ask you, Mr. Rizvit, how can advanced technologies such as open source intelligence and the databases that you're developing at ICMP be leveraged to effectively locate and identify large numbers of missing children?
Thanks, Sarah. I'm very much honored that I'm part of this very important discussion. And I hope I will be able to contribute a little bit to this discussion. Of course, we are witnessing the rapid development in the IT industry in the last decade, and so, which resulted with, availability of the internet, easy access to the mobile devices, 4G, 5G, which pretty much resulted on the end with a huge amount of the data to be stored, deployed to the public domain. And, on the end also, all of us here, pretty much, and all people, including the missing, unfortunately, has its own digital footprint. And that digital footprint is the main point of interest when we are talking about open source intelligence data, because this is intelligence pretty much obtained during the collection and analysis of the data when the specific question on your mind. Meaning this is a very important thing which I would like to discuss. And when we are talking about the public domain, we are talking about public records, we are talking about websites, we are talking about social medias, we are talking about libraries, we are talking about dark web, which is also a point of interest when we are talking about the missing kids. And of course, it's a perfectly legal. Mm-hmm. However, it does raise some ethical questions and consideration. Hence the reason why there is no magic button to say, okay, I want to use the OSINT, unless you prepare you well to address some concerns and some possible obstacles. Meaning that you need to go through the preparation phase if you want to deploy the OSINT technology, which pretty much the fair question you need to ask yourself is, okay, what the data collected means to me, what I want to do out of that data. Because if you have the clear answer on that question, the framework which you are developing, it's pretty much fulfilled the requirements in that particular exercise. The second is, of course, the collection And every single day we are also witnessing the number of the different tools, depending which sources of information, public sources you are targeted, that are available. Commercial, some are free of charge. But when you collect the data, the very important fact is that to understand that what you are obtaining is raw data. And that data needs to be processed, meaning the data is coming in different formats, different types. You have images, you have video footage, you have narrative records, meaning the data needs to be formatted, classified, and stored in the easy accessible and the format which is ready to be analyzed.
So appreciate your details on the vast amounts of data. What are the ways to protect such data from misuse across different countries, across different missions, across organizations for human rights purposes, humanitarian purposes,
Sure.
slightly different?
Hence the reason why I mentioned in the beginning, you know, that before collection of the data, we need to have all ducks in the row, or with other words, we need to be ready exactly for these kind of the questions and find the solutions, you know. Data protection is the number one, of course. How to protect the sensitive data and how you can do that on the institutional level, having a number of the different policies which applies to your work. Also on the technical level, because you know that the good storage and safe storage of the data is very important, meaning you know that developing such a secure mechanism for the storage of the data, but not with the price tag that the data is so protected that it's almost difficult to share, because there is no point of the collection of the data if the data will not be shared with the others. And here I would like to echo, you know, one of the previous panelists, which is a quite, you know, for me, very important call for all of us to work together. And that exactly means when we are talking about the data, because pieces of the data collected by one organization, one ministry, one NGO, maybe means nothing. But if all of these pieces of the puzzle are somehow on the secure, but still easy, accessible depository, then this process can be way more quicker and the families can finally get the answers.
Great, that's a good transition to our next guest, Dr. Jose Lorente. I have a slightly different description. Dr. Lorente is a professor of forensic medicine at Granada University and has applied cutting-edge DNA technologies, particularly to support justice. In 1999, he launched the Spain's Phoenix program, which is one of the first DNA database systems for identification of missing persons, and in 2004 created DNA Pro Kids specifically for the identification missing and trafficked children. So, Dr. Lorente, how has DNA technology advanced the process for missing persons, and especially for the reunification purposes for children that have been displaced?
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. It is my pleasure, my privilege to be here at the ICMP. Thank you so much for the invitation. Her Majesty, all friends of at the ICMP. First of all, I would like to give the best wishes in regards from the Spanish people to the Ukrainian government, to the Ukrainian people. We are here for them, and we will stand as long as they need us. Okay, what is identification through DNA? It is identification. Identify means that we have to compare to something. If we don't have a reference sample, we cannot identify anyone. Fingerprints, anthropology, ontology, whatever, we need a reference. The DNA technology, as of today, it's powerful enough to identify every single person in the world, as long as we have the right reference sample. What it means, according to my experience, working in many countries with missing persons and missing children, one of the main challenges that we have, I don't know, but I just want to raise this point. What is the situation in Ukraine? But we have to make sure that every single family in Ukraine who has a missing child knows that there are technologies that can help them. We have to make sure that every single family in Ukraine knows that they can give for free, of course, sample to try to match. We have to make sure that we collect enough biological information. I mean, if we are identifying children, we have the father and the mother first, of course, but mother, the father. But if we have other brothers, grandparents, the more information we can get, it's the better for the results that we can expect. In this case, and with the powerful technology, I'm not concerned about, I'm not too concerned, I'm concerned, of course, but I don't worry if we have different databases in different laboratories, or even countries, as long as they are perfectly connected and they can share with enough security. I mean, if security concern is always there, as long as they can share the data. And that's important. The other concern is the ethical one. You, Sarah, knows a lot about that. Informed consent, who holds the data, how our databases run. And another point that it is important, in my opinion, is the quality of the lab. Labs should be accredited to do that, or should show enough experiences for us to make sure, to be sure that what the results that they are generating are good enough and can be shared. Otherwise, this could mislead and could even lead to a wrong identification.
Can you explain the difference between a case-by-case or one-to-one comparison? Because we see DNA testing being done often for relationship testing. It's common in the news and it's common for missing persons. Explain the difference between that and the value of having a database system, or a database of missing children, a database of relatives.
Yeah, it's, I mean, in the situation we are facing in Ukraine, and it's unfortunately in many other places in the world, the one-to-one approach doesn't usually work. One-to-one is that a child is missing, is stolen, is kidnapped, whatever. A child is found, and then we have the suspect that this child found, whatever, is the son of that particular mother and father. It belongs to that family. So we do one case and the analysis, and we either identify or not. If we do a positive identification, the child is returned to the family, and great, everything works. But if not, what? So in our case, the only approach is to generate powerful databases, including the largest amount of, in our particular case, DNA, genetic information we can generate. Right. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean there is only one database, but it necessarily means, and this is, yes, it's a must, that the databases are interconnected and can share, safely share the genetic information. Okay. Otherwise, it won't work.
Great. I'm going to transition to our guests online. We have 3 more panelists online, so use your headsets if you need translation. Mr. Sergei Krimchek is the director of the State Scientific Research Forensic Center at the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. Mr. Krimchek served in various capacities within the system of law enforcement bodies of Ukraine, including the National Police of Ukraine. Mr. Krimchek has a PhD in law and is a certified forensic expert and has represented Ukraine at numerous international scientific and specialized events. And in fact, in 2020, he was anointed with the title of Honored Lawyer of Ukraine. Thanks for joining, Mr. Krimchek. We're honored to have you here. I want to ask, Ukraine is applying, we know that Ukraine is applying advanced technologies for the purpose of identifying children, specifically talking about the children that have been taken into Russia. and reunifying them with the families or legal guardians. Can you tell us about what is happening currently in that capacity?
Thank you for the invitation. I would like to thank ICMP for a possibility to speak today at this event. I would like to say a few words about the current activities. Our main activity is to provide qualified and objective expert opinion at the pre-trial phase, investigation phase. Given the fact that the military of the Russian Federation are committing many war crimes, we have currently received 93 applications to appoint forensic experts to do expert opinions, and the majority of such expert opinions are molecular and genetic expert opinions. They constitute 68% of all forensic expert opinions that are done by us. And this in the context of the war crimes committed by the Russians in Bucha, Irpin, Liman, and in many other places in Ukraine, in line with the Ukrainian law on the protection of the personal information of Ukraine. We run a state register of the genome information. Our center is the administrator of this electronic register. The war means that we have sustained major losses among our military, civil population, and children, sadly. Therefore, we need to identify a large number of otherwise unidentified bodies. We have already placed 12,400 DNA profiles of unidentified bodies. And this means that we have also a lot of material and information on children. 48,964 relatives have submitted their DNA materials. Within that, we have 6,967 children who have submitted their DNA material. We already have identified more than 6,000 people. Those are the military, the civilians, but also children. We have been able to identify many bodies in mass graves, and in those mass graves we have found out many bodies of children as well. We have been able to also study a lot of material in the territories liberated from the Russian occupiers, and we hope and we're sure that every Russian serviceman will be held accountable, will face the criminal court, not only in Ukraine, but also within the international criminal jurisdiction, and will do will place all efforts so as to bring Ukrainian children back to Ukraine. That's all in brief. Many thanks for your kind attention, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much for your comments. We definitely would like to hear more about the outreach activities, but I'd like to introduce the other two panelists as well. Mr. Andriy Levitsky, he is the head of the Criminalistic Support Department of the Main Investigation Department of the National Police of Ukraine. Mr. Levitsky, what innovative approaches and technologies are being used by the National Police of Ukraine to search for the missing children?
Thank you for a possibility to take part in this discussion. I also would like to thank the ICMP for working with us on this painful issue, which is the forcible deportation of Ukrainian children. This is the matter of high priority for the Ukrainian state. We have quite a number of competent state authorities addressing this problem, but also there are many non-governmental organizations and international partners who are helping us. We know that forcible deportation of children to Russia is also a part of the international arrest warrant issued against Mr. Putin. As at the 17th of June, based on the data of the National Information Bureau, we have information on the number of deported or forcibly displaced children. It's 19,546 children that we know of. But also, we have at least 2,004 children missing. This is a huge number of children missing, not only for Ukraine, but also for the international community. 551 child was killed in the result of combat operations against Ukraine. And also 1,382 children were wounded. The National Police of Ukraine, the investigative department, when inspecting the sites of committing crimes, are extracting this information, and when working in the field, we use the tools and instruments that allow us for the rapid DNA identification. We also cooperate with the forensic services of the Interior, Ministry of the Interior, and this is how we're capable of identifying the children or the possible human remains, so as to be able to identify a child. We understand that this genetic information is important. It is possible to use this information once we have information from the parents, but also it's important to have information, genetic information from the grandparents. When children are being deported to the different childcare centers, perhaps it would be important to provide for the collection of such genetic information. And as I said before, forcible deportation is done in two ways by the Russians. First is the use of filtration camps. The filtration procedure means that children were taken away from their parents, and then the children were subsequently forcibly deported to the territory of the Russian Federation, of the aggressor state, or the children were being forcibly deported from the childcare institutions. In such cases, the identification of such children is rather difficult. And in such cases, what helps is to have some imagery, photographic imagery of those children. So perhaps we could identify those children at a later stage, or we need to have a possibility to finding their parents, siblings, or grandparents. And this is when we have a greater probability of carrying out effective identification.
We understand that this process will take some time because children are growing up, and also there is probability that parents or grandparents are abroad. On the initiative of the University of Interior, abroad there are centers where DNA samples are taken from relatives of those children and are used in order to identify, profile. They are used by departments of the National Police and by different agencies that take part in identification process. We hope that those children will be back to Ukraine as soon as possible, and they will be reunited with their parents and with their families. Because for each and every country, children, this is the future of the nation. Children is our future generation, and they need to understand that they are Ukrainians. The National Police of Ukraine will do our best to document all these crimes, those war crimes perpetrated by Russia, and to identify children when bringing them back to our country.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm truly honored and just excited and terrified at the same time to have all of these voices come together so that we can understand what all of the different groups are doing and work in unison with the ICMP. The last panelist I'd like to hear from is, or we'd like to join and welcome, is Mr. Vitaly Kasap. He is the head of the Department of International Police Cooperation of the National Police of Ukraine. Mr. Kasap has extensive experience in criminal investigation and international relations within the Ministry of Interior of Ukraine, and he has served with the UN in Kosovo, the EU police in Bosnia, etc. Since February 2024, he has headed the Department of International Police Cooperation in the National Police of Ukraine. Mr. Kasap, in what ways has Ukraine engaged with the international bodies, the other stakeholders, human rights organizations, to address the cases of the missing children?
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you so much for this excellent opportunity to speak up. Yes, I represent the National Police of Ukraine, and in addition to what Andriy Levitsky has already said, all the activities of our experts at the National Police of Ukraine, I would like to add a few words. Please show my next slide on the screen. So first, I would like to tell you about a very concrete initiatives that we introduced in the end of 2022. This is a project which is related to increasing the capacities of the National Police of Ukraine in terms of reunification of Ukrainian families. And it was very interesting to me to hear the experience of the representative of Pro-Buskida organization, because taking into account this experience, we made the conclusion that we need to launch this process, which was initiated by the representatives of Under company. This project provides for creation of a DNA database in Ukraine. This database will have DNA samples of relatives of those children that were deported to the territory of Russia or Belarus. And the aim behind this project is to provide the possibilities for these children in short and long term to understand their relations, to identify themselves, and to understand where they are part of a particular family thanks to these DNA analysis, and in such a way to promote a reunification of these children with their families. I'm sorry there is an air raid alert in Ukraine, but we will continue our work. What is also important is that we implement this project, and in the moment when our sample corresponds to a sample from a child that is brought back, then automatically we have this as an evidence to the fact that there was a war crime of illegal deportation of this child from the territory of Ukraine. As for this initiative, Andy company within these last 2 years, I don't know whether it's good or bad, but within these past 2 years, we managed to receive enough equipment provided by this company, which lets us perform rapid DNA tests. And all our regional departments of the National Police of Ukraine are equipped with these particular rapid DNA tests. And of course, as you understand, we have a lot of need to use this equipment in almost all the cases when there are attacks by the Russian aggressor, when they attack the civilian population using their drones, using their missiles. We have a lot of victims and we have a lot of survivors that we need to identify. Unfortunately, as of now, the National Police of Ukraine, which covers about 95 war crimes perpetrated on the territory of Ukraine, more than 105,000 crimes, account to this topic. We are really grateful to the wider support, including the support of the Ukrainian embassy in the Netherlands, including the Bureau of Coordination of the National Police of Ukraine. We are also grateful to the financial aid provided by the Netherlands. Thanks to all the stakeholders, we managed to launch this project. And as of now, together with our implementing partners, UNDP Ukraine, we are at the final stage of this project and we start implementing it. With the implementation of this project, we will use our capacities of our police, of the Ministry of Interior of Ukraine, as well as other agencies in Ukraine. And together we will do our best to search for relatives of missing children, of deported children, in order to collect as many samples of their DNA as possible and to store them in our database. Of course, we will also develop our communication strategy, and we will develop a communication campaign which will be certainly needed in our society. The ICMP will also be included in this important work. We will also engage other departments, including criminal departments of the National Police of Ukraine, because we need to do our best in identifying the relatives of the missing children. Of course, the support of our donors is of utmost importance. We are talking about the launch of this large-scale project, but we understand that we have a lot of work to do, and that is why we will need to
Thank you so much, Mr.
add to this database. On this slide, you can see the key elements which we use within this project. So here you can see our needs, what we need to do, and how much funding we need. So I would also like to mention another international cooperation. We are using ICMP. Together with you, we developed a tight cooperation, and we are using the chance of the presence of ICP experts in Ukraine and abroad. They are helping us to collect DNA samples of relatives of the missing children that are now abroad, because as you know, about 6 million Ukrainians are now displaced in the European countries.
Thank you, Ms. Kasap. We have to keep moving, but it's wonderful to hear the cooperation and the international efforts that are being made across law enforcement, across humanitarian objectives. We have 8 minutes left, and I have 6 panelists. So I'm going to ask the panelists to please answer the same question. We'll go in the reverse order, but you only get 1 minute. So in 1 minute, it's clear that we need some sort of broad campaign outreach to families of the missing children. Some of those families know where their children are, know those identities, but the DNA data might be valuable for human rights documentation. Other families have no idea where their children are and need an effort of a database to find them in the short term or hope that they come forward in the long term, however long that might be. So in 1 minute, Mr. Kasap, what would you suggest we do to ensure a successful campaign in the next year?
As for the search and as for the use of different instruments, as far as I understand, you are talking about non-governmental organization, about the use of SINT tools. We need to continue working together in a coordinated way to find relevant information, to collect it, to store it, so it can be used by the right client, I mean by us, by those people who perform those investigations. This is a very important work, and Europol is part of this work. At Europol, they have a special department responsible for collecting information from all the partners if this information is related to investigation of war crimes, including war crimes related to deported children. As soon as we have any information, they do this match, they do this linkage, and we can respond using this information. So the only way to go is in coordination with our partners.
Mr. Levitsky, your turn, 1 minute. What can we do to ensure a successful campaign?
To make this campaign successful, our Department of the National Police of Ukraine, together with other law enforcement agencies, is taking DNA samples from all relatives, and we are storing these DNA samples so they can be used to identify their profiles in the future. So when a child will be brought back to Ukraine, when they will cross the border, we will also take their DNA samples. It is important to use this information when these children will be coming back to Ukraine. The more DNA samples we have, the longer it is stored in our databases. The better equipment and the better automatic search we have, the more opportunities we will have to identify those children as part of our nation.
Thank you. Mr. Krimchek?
I fully agree with what my colleague Andrei Levitsky has said. It is very important to fill in this database, to add more samples to it. To store this genetic data, we need to integrate this information and to exchanges with representatives of the ICMP and with other law enforcement agencies, including on the territory of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Lorente.
Yeah, I mean, everything has been said so far. I have to agree, but in the long term, for those cases where there is no reference samples, we at DNA Pro Kids and Return are using the support of doctors and teachers to reach every single family in the most hidden corner in the country to try to convince them, because in most cases we'll be convinced them to give to yield samples for DNA analysis. So that could be a hint.
Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Rizvit.
For me, the key for the success campaign will be the good and solid preparation, because before you launch the campaign, you need to do the proper outreach. Also, the people who are collecting necessary reference samples, you know, it's all about the managing expectation coming from the family members, because this is unfortunately the process which potentially can take, you know, the years in order for the families to get the answers. Meaning, technically everything is possible, but the good planning and working together, where we can once again share the experience and necessary data sets in order to have a successful campaign, is a key.
Okay, thank you. And I give the final 3 minutes to my partner here, Dr. Barnard, and I ask you also about the challenges with the date. So what are the things that we need to do to establish a successful campaign, but also with all of these different players working in different aspects, what are the warning signs we need to look for?
Thank you. So you've all given me the answers and the pieces, so I'll try to put it together from my perspective. I think we need to work together so that there's a cohesive, trauma-informed, developmentally aligned strategy. So what does it mean to be working with a 4-year-old versus a 17-year-old, or a family where a mother thinks her child is likely deceased or her child is likely alive? So we really need to have protocols, and we need to have people trained to deal with these different situations. I propose that we move forward with a DNA-led strategy, and that means using DNA when applicable and in partnership with other methods. When DNA tends to be applicable is for the youngest children, so the babies and the toddlers, the less than 5-year-old children who can't reliably identify their parents and caregivers, and then when there are longer-term separations. So to give you a sense of the long view, as recently as 3 weeks ago, I was contacted by somebody I had never met saying, I was born in El Salvador in 1978 and adopted in the United States. How can you help me find your family? And so this work really matters. We need to remember that it matters for healthy development, and that this inner longing for one's connection with their family and with their identity persists into adulthood. In terms of the safeguards that are in place, as I said, I believe DNA is a powerful tool, but it must be used very mindful of the risks and potential unintended consequences of DNA. And so we really need to make sure that there's appropriate DNA safeguards in place, and that's where the partnerships and the different groups come into play. So as I suggested, it's really important to have the community organizations on the ground working with the families. The government role, I think, is going to be very valuable in Ukraine, and then have very state-of-the-art data safeguarding approaches with organizations like the ICMP, and all of this to serve the best interest of the child. Thank you.
I thank my panelists for their thoughts on this context, and I want to leave with the notion that there is no global strategy for family reunification for any child contexts that are separated anywhere in the world. So here we have this opportunity that is unfortunate, what is happening to the families in Ukraine, but an opportunity to develop the tools to be able to act next time and act swiftly, whether it's in 10 years or 20 years, etc. So I really appreciate everyone's attention, and I hope that this is the first of many, many conversations and collaborations moving forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Colleagues, in a couple of seconds from now, we shall begin. Hello, and thus we are moving on to the third panel of today's roundtable discussion. Just would like to remind you that you can see QR codes. Please use the QR codes to submit your questions. After this panel discussion, we're going to have a Q&A session. Therefore, we would be very grateful for many questions submitted so that the panelists from this panel discussion, from the previous panel discussions, will have an opportunity to address your questions. But that shall be done after we finish with this panel discussion. My name is Olena Lunova. I'm the advocacy manager at this MENA civil society organization. I'm from Crimea, and once my house was occupied, I had to leave. And since that time, I have been dealing with protecting the rights of those who have suffered from the military aggression against Ukraine. We're documenting war crimes. We cooperate with a number of other CS organizations in Ukraine, and thus we have established the coalition Ukraine 5 a.m. in the morning. There we document the cases of deportation, and also we document the deportation of children. Also, I'm dealing with the development of the special law of Ukraine on the persons missing under special circumstances. So initially we spoke about the scale of the problem. The second panel was a technical one and very important, but now we're going to talk about the way forward. What do we have to do as the state? What do we have to do in cooperation with our international partners so as to identify and return the children, the missing children as a result of the armed aggression, or talking about returning children who have been deported to the Russian Federation and to Belarus. Now let me introduce our panelists today. Dr. Paul Weiss, Professor of Child Health and Sighted, Professor of Pediatrics, Division of Neonatology and Developmental Medicine and Health Policy at Stanford University. Hello, Mr. Weiss. Maxim Maximov, head of projects at Bring the Kids Back UA initiative, an initiative of the President of Ukraine designed to coordinate the efforts of Ukrainian and international partners. Oksana Dmitrieva, head of the Department for the Organization of Procedural Guidance and Support of Public Prosecution in Criminal Proceedings in the field of child protection and violence against children at the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. And also together with us, we have an online participant, Artur Dobrosertov. You've already seen him, the appointed commissioner on missing persons under special circumstances, who coordinates the coordination of state institutions dealing with the issue of missing persons in Ukraine. Artur, hello. And together with us, although we do not have with us neither online nor on-site, but we will have a video addressed by Daria Kharamsachuk. She's the Presidential Advisor Commissioner for Children's Rights and Child Rehabilitation. She coordinates the Children of War web platform created by the Ministry of Reintegration and the National Information Bureau on behalf of the Office of the President of Ukraine. And let us listen to her video address first. So, video address by Mrs. Kharamchuk. On the 24th of February 2022, the lives of all mothers in Ukraine changed. Now, each one of us knows exactly where the safest place in our homes is, that is between the two walls, and what kind of pajamas to wear to look decent in case rescuers dig you out of the rubble. We make beds for our children on the floor, in the corridor, or in the bathroom. because we hope that if a missile hits, the child will survive nonetheless. But none of us thinks about the significance of DNA for child identification. I realized this when I heard about the DNA identification of a 17-year-old boy killed by a Russian missile in a Kharkiv DIY store just a few weeks ago. And the next moment I was already thinking about Sashko Radchuk, with whom I went to Davos, The Hague, and the UN. It is about a 13-year-old teenager now who survived a severe shrapnel wound during the occupation. He survived Russian captivity and the loss of all contact with his mother, whom he has been looking for more than 2 years now. Sasha's mother, Snizhana, was taken away from him by the Russian occupiers during the filtration operation in April 2022 near Mariupol. At that time, the then 11-year-old Sasha was separated from his closest person and then forcibly held in a Donetsk hospital for a month. He was miraculously rescued and returned to Ukraine. He is still looking for his mother and hopes to find her. And now, each one of you can do the math. What are the options of actually helping Sasha should we have the DNA test done? Have you done the maths? Impressive, is it not? Well, what is striking is that the lives of each of Ukraine's 7.5 million children have changed and will never again be the same. Where an organization like the International Commission on Missing Persons with its capabilities and experience will be needed. Killings and maiming, sexual violence, abductions. This is a far from complete list of crimes committed by the Russians against Ukrainian children, where all the knowledge and experience, all the capabilities, and all the connections of the Commission and its partners are needed. We need the support of other similar organizations. These are the facts that are already known to the entire world. I could list individual cases and situations indefinitely, because according to the Office of the Prosecutor General, more than 3,800 war crimes committed against children during the Russian aggression are currently under investigation. What can we say about the figure of about 20,000 cases of abduction, namely forcible deportation or forced displacement of children? The names and personal data of 19,456 children have already been verified by the relevant government authorities and institutions, and we managed to return almost 50 of them, but 500 of them, but this means that we still have a lot of work to do, and you can help us with it. As early as in August 2022, the President of Ukraine established a special coordination council for the protection and safety of children to address the issue of deportation and forced displacement of Ukrainian children by Russia. This coordination council is chaired by the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, by Andriy Yermak. It is the coordination council, which in close cooperation with the relevant national and international NGOs, is working on finding all possible ways, means, methods or scenarios to stop the genocide of the Ukrainian nation by the Russians through our children, and to return all the children abducted by the Russists back to Ukraine. To properly address the issue of deported and forcibly displaced children, the President of Ukraine initiated a special program called Bring Kids Back UA. This action plan includes 7 blocks. That is, the return of Ukrainian children deported by Russia, international and national instruments. It also includes a project to develop family-based forms of education. It includes reintegration of children returned from Russia, organization of their socialization and educational initiatives. This program envisages functioning of a specially created Center for the Protection of Children's Rights. We also need to record crimes and bring Russia to justice. This program includes interparliamentary cooperation, communication, and public events. The issue of returning all deported and forcibly displaced children is included in the formula, in the peace formula of President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky. Namely, it is part and parcel of the 4th block on the return of all prisoners of war, civilians, and deported citizens of Ukraine. Together with Canada, Ukraine has launched and is currently creating an international coalition of states for the return of deported Ukrainian children, which already includes 37 countries, and 2 countries have reported participation as observers. To ensure the safety and protection of children, Ukraine has established cooperation with all possible and impossible international legal institutions, mandates and mechanisms, such as the mandate of the UN Secretary General Special Representative for Children associated with the armed conflict, that is the so-called CAAC mechanism. Ukraine, as a state that cares about its children, has developed and signed a joint preventive plan with the UN. At the same time, Russia has not yet done what it was supposed to do. Russia has not developed a joint action plan with the UN because it was Russia that the UN Secretary General was named as a violator in the annex to his annual report for 2023, which lists the criminals who committed serious violations against children in armed conflicts. This is the first time a permanent member of the UN Security Council has been listed for more than 1,200 grave violations against children. This list and this figure, based on UN-verified data, is just the tip of an iceberg. Russia still has a voice at the global level, while Ukrainian children continue to suffer daily from Russia's own criminal actions. Our goal is to protect Ukrainian children and their rights, to completely stop the deportation and forcible displacement of Ukrainian children and their forcible transfer to Russian families, and to take all necessary measures to ensure the safe return of children and family reunification in accordance with the best interest of the child and international law. We play by the rules. Who will stop and punish the offender? We are sincerely grateful to all those who are already helping us and open for cooperation. Let us save Ukrainian children together so that tomorrow this does not happen to other children in other countries in the world. Daria has set the stage for this discussion because we are going to talk about our investigations, how we are dealing with investigating the facts of missing children. We're going to talk about international platforms that will help us to coordinate the cooperation of partners who will lead to the return of children. And we need to talk about what will happen to these children once they return, because it is important to reintegrate the returnees. Now, Oksana, you are representative of the Office of the public prosecutor, and you have assumed a lot of responsibility. You're running many investigations, and you're looking into this situation. You're also talking with the international legal mechanisms. So the question is, what are the current challenges in the process of establishing the whereabouts of the missing children, and what kind of support do you need? Thank you. I am very happy to meet all of the participants of this roundtable. Microphone, does it work? Today, we are talking about very sensitive issue. We're talking about the protection of the interests of children. And no child in the world should have experienced the war. However, millions of Ukrainian children had to look into the eyes of the war. To begin my contribution, I would like to quote the words of a little Ukrainian 6-year-old boy, Raphael, who said, "Peace is when everything is beautiful. War is when your heart breaks." War is always terrible, but suffering children are the worst phase of war. It is always a calamity that affects many lives. Children going missing is one of the tragic aspects of any conflict. Today, I want to highlight the significance of this issue and how we can act to address it. In the context of the armed conflicts and subsequently the full-scale invasion, the number of missing children is increasing daily. Abductions, deportations, unlawful detentions, violence, and murders are some of the main causes of the children going missing. Pre-trial investigations are currently underway in 372 criminal proceedings into the cases of about 2,000 children missing during the hostilities. Moreover, within the framework of the criminal proceedings, we are verifying the information of the National Information Bureau on the transfer within the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and deportation to Russia and Belarus from Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Mykolaiv, Kharkiv regions of 19,546 Ukrainian children aged 9 months to 18 years. And we all understand that under martial law, traditional or established methods of searching for missing persons differ from the search for such persons under other circumstances. And this is due to the presence of a significant number of temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and active combat zones, where the activities of the relevant government authorities are limited by external factors and threats. War always brings chaos. Infrastructure is crumbling. Lines of communications are disrupted. Information is becoming fragmented. Parents, relatives, and guardians may be separated or dead. This makes children more vulnerable. Moreover, many families are forced to leave their homes. They're looking for better fate and seek refuge in other regions or countries. And during these movements, as part of filtering measures, children are often separated from their parents. And another aspect that has been voiced today, it is that the Ukrainian children are receiving Russian citizenship, and it is virtually impossible to establish the actual identity of such children due to the acceleration of the procedure of granting Ukrainian children Russian citizenship and the simplification of the procedure for their adoption, including the possibility of changing their key identification data. And this is just a brief summary of the challenges Ukraine is facing in search for missing children. Therefore, as we're looking into the way forward, it is important to understand how we can mobilize legal mechanisms to address these problems. And let me outline a few areas that I believe require our attention. First, international cooperation. International cooperation is key to solving this problem, as missing children can be located both in the occupied territory, but also may stay abroad. And the following aspects are important. First, it is the development of effective mechanisms for the return of children. As our experience has shown, Russia ignores the requirements of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war regarding the prohibition of forced deportation, and, under the guise of the so-called evacuation for security reasons or for emergency medical care, children are actually taken to the Russian Federation or Belarus. And at the same time, they do not meet the obligations under Article 78 of the Additional Protocol 1 to the above-mentioned convention regarding the creation of an information card for each child due to be sent to the Central Tracing Agency of the International Committee of the Red Cross, which means that this mechanism does not work, and we need our cooperation so as to develop new, effective mechanisms addressed at returning children. And the second issue that I would like to mention is the cases of disappearance of children that are related to abduction and illegal deprivation of liberty, including on the grounds of the children's active pro-Ukrainian position. Currently, more than 120 children have suffered from these illegal actions committed by representatives of the authorities and servicemen of the Russian Federation. Let me give you an example. In May 2022, in one of the settlements of the Polokhiv district of the Zaporizhia region, representatives of the Russian armed forces invited two brothers, aged 13 and 16, to go to the commandant's office in order to check them if they cooperate with the Ukrainian side. Once the children were taken to the commander's office, the younger of the brothers was released a couple of hours later. However, the older brother was being detained for about a week and he was subjected to all of the mechanisms of the filtration procedure. The teenager was interviewed with the use of video recording, and he refused to testify due to fears for his life and health. And I'm giving you this example so as to show that we all need to understand that the safety of children and their best interests are paramount. And in this context, it is very important to cooperate with international organizations that have experience in searching for and protecting children in crisis situations, as children are at risk as the war is going on. The children that stay in the occupied territories are always under threat, and that is why this cooperation is so important for us. We need to protect our children. One more issue that I need to voice is the children that are currently staying abroad. For instance, in the EU member states, we know that many children are in the EU member states, and in this context, it is very important to look into possibility of establishing cooperation and developing mechanisms of cooperation for rapid exchange of information, and to provide for cooperation with the law enforcement agencies of different countries. This interaction can be realized, for example, through the application of universal jurisdiction and accordingly the creation or establishment of joint investigation teams. One more point that I would like to mention is technological innovation. Modern technology has indeed great potential to solve the problem of accounting for missing children. The technologies can significantly speed up and facilitate this process by providing effective tools for identification, tracking, and communication. So, for example, facial recognition technologies, drones, and satellite imagery can help us to locate children. Social media are a powerful tool for quickly disseminating information about missing children, engaging a wide range of people in the search. Also, the use of this analytics, big data analytics, can help us identify patterns that can be useful in the search for missing children.
Therefore, supporting implementation of technological capabilities is very important for the effective search for children missing during the war. The final issue I would like to focus your attention on today is creating conditions for the safe return of our children. So, in short, it is about humanitarian support, rehabilitation, and reintegration. The mentioned above approaches are efficiently used during reintegration of children returned from deportation, in particular using the capacities of the Children Protection Center, which was launched on the initiative of the President of Ukraine on the 1st June of 2023. The center's capabilities allowed it to carry out the necessary investigative actions with the child in a child-friendly environment. I would like to say that the principle of interdisciplinary response by specialists to the needs of children involved in criminal proceedings is also implemented based on the Barnahus model. Today, thanks to the support of the UNICEF in Ukraine, there are 12 such centers. As for the challenges faced by our country, the number of children who have suffered from war crimes and criminal violations need to see implementation and expansion of this network. The active program of rehabilitation and mechanism for reintegration of children in this category is possible when we will use the experience of other countries that have faced similar problems. Summing up, I would like to underline that only by joining our efforts at the national level, international level, technology companies and civil society, we can ensure the protection of our children and their safe return home. Thank you so much, Oksana, for such a broad outlook on the problems that you face when searching children that have gone missing. And now I would like to ask the following question to Artur. Artur, are you here with us? So in the first panel, you told us a lot about statistics, about the number of people that were found or those who are still missing. The position of the State Commissioner on Missing Children is about coordination of efforts of the civil society, of state institutions, international partners, and other stakeholders. So my question is related to the next steps that we might use to increase the efficiency of the search of missing children. So our third panel is called Way Forward, and I really like this name because we really need to use all the opportunities to move forward, to use all the capacities of our internal institutions, civil society organizations, foundations, NGOs, and the experience of international organizations in this area. We understand clearly that most answers to these questions will be able to receive only after our victory, after the victory of Ukraine. Right now, we need to continue collecting information about these children. For example, in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, this child was 16 years old, and now they have already turned 18 years old, so they are of age. And we need to have as many evidence as possible and to share this information with those who are actively involved in searching for this child and who is capable of returning this child back to Ukraine. As for the challenges that we face, we do the following. We communicate a lot with civil society organizations, and we ask them to provide us with information about those children that they worked with when treating different cases of disappearance. As of now, since the moment we started working with this information, we have received the list of 300 children. We added this information to our register, unified register of missing persons. We shared this information with law enforcement. We identified some cases when relatives didn't reach out to the police and where these search missions were not in place. It is very important to conduct these awareness campaigns so relatives of these children understand which institution is responsible for treating these issues, who is the contact person they can contact to help find their children. It is also important for the state institutions to get together and to bring these children back. Question number one is for citizens of our country to understand how to act efficiently so their children are found. Second, we receive a lot of experience and recommendations from the ICMP when it comes to development of our register. We understand that the question of looking for children is related to a very specific process of collecting information, collecting data. We are also using our technologies, and we must understand whether we have DNA samples from close relatives, other relatives, or probably those samples taken from personal belongings of the missing children. We also are looking for non-standard or regional solutions. For example, one hacker group got access to a group which is called Children of Donbass, and thanks to the information that they got there, we are aware of some aspects and whereabouts of the missing children, and we know where to look for them. The key lesson learned based on all this experience is that with time we have less and less information. Those children that are now in Russia, they have their names changed, their personal identification data changed, and will be increasingly more difficult for us to find them. That is why we need to engage all these state institutions to collect this information, to analyze it and share it with other stakeholders. Thank you so much, Artur. This is really very important to have this information, to store it properly and to analyze it in order to be able to improve our joint efforts, to improve our results in searching missing children who continue to go missing during this aggression, which unfortunately continues. So, Mr. Maximov, the Office of the President, after the start of the full-scale invasion, took this leadership position in building national and international coalitions involving those organizations and institutions that help bring children back. We were talking about searching for children, but bringing them back is another task that our state has, that our international partners have, because unfortunately our state cannot do it on its own. So my question is about coordination, but more about coordination between the government, civil society sector, international organizations, and international partners. Can we make it any better? And what is the current state of affairs? Because we know about the number of children that returned. Unfortunately, it's not very high, but our final task is to return all children to Ukraine. So what we do now and what is left to be done?
It's a very important question indeed, and probably its importance lies primarily in the fact that the scale and the nature of the challenge faced by Ukraine currently today is quite unprecedented. I mean, the visuals that we have around us, the remarks that have been made, especially during the first panel, the remarks that have been provided by Oksana Dmitrieva also have been vivid, so I don't think that I need to go that much into detail about the scale of the problem that we're facing. However, what I want to say is that Ukraine, being in these circumstances, like any other country that would be in our position, would not be able to deal with this challenge on its own. And especially the central government itself also would not be able to address the issue through its own efforts as well. And that actually has been one of the key ideas behind the Bring Kids Back UA initiative, was exactly to coordinate the actions among various stakeholders across the government, civil society, international organizations, states, etc. Of course, given the brutality of the war against Ukraine, the toll of the human suffering, I guess it's fair to say that this coordination hasn't always been ideal. However, we also need to acknowledge that because of that coordination that actually did happen, we were able to achieve a lot. And I think even during the first panel discussion, remarks that were made by some of the panelists are very illustrative of that. Because of the joint work of the government of Ukraine and non-governmental organizations, we are able to accumulate quite the amount of the documented war crimes by the Russian authorities against Ukraine, especially when it comes to the children. Because of the cooperation of the authorities with the open source intelligence authorities, we are able to fill some of the gaps that we have when it comes to the data on the children, especially as regards the whereabouts, the current whereabouts of the children, and the history of the displacement. And of course, because of the efficiency and the effectiveness of the work of the number of the non-governmental organizations who have already been speaking today as well, we were able to return the considerable number of children back to Ukraine. The same applies to reintegration and rehabilitation support that is provided to the children post-return. Now, when we think about the international partners and foreign partners kind of stream of cooperation, the case is actually the same as it is with the NGOs, local and foreign. Without the support from our international friends, we would not be able to achieve even what we have achieved so far. And I think that that is one of the primary reasons why so much effort has been put in the recent years to build this architecture of support of Ukraine on this issue globally. Of course, on top of that, there is Ukraine's peace formula, which is, I'm sure you're all well aware of the recent peace summit that took place in Switzerland and the communique that was supported by more than 80 states and international organizations. One of the key focuses has been the return of the unlawfully deported children. Now, on the next level, there is the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children, co-led by Ukraine and Canada. Almost 40 states are participating in its work. And within its scope, actually, even the last week, Canada announced allocation of significant funds to support the reintegration of the forcibly displaced children through improving the child care protection services and family-based care options. Now, when we speak not necessarily about the state level of coordination, but of an expert kind of bodies, there is the Bring Kids Back UA task force that was established under the President's Office of Ukraine, co-chaired by Baroness Helena Kennedy and head of the office, Andriy Yermak. It has a twofold mission. The first one is addressing the key challenge that we all, I suppose, have, is finding these new mechanisms to bring the kids back, because as we all know, Russia does everything to prevent that from happening. But that is mostly not public area of work so far. And in addition to that, the task force and the group of experts is focused on acting as a thought leader in the arena and finding those complex answers to the complex questions, such as how do we assess the best interest of the child in the context of Ukraine and its abducted children, or what are the best standards and international practices when it comes to rehabilitating and reintegrating children once they are returned. So what I'm trying to say is that there are lots of moving pieces. There are dozens of stakeholders in the government itself. There are dozens of stakeholders in civil society when we speak of Ukraine on the ground. There are dozens and dozens of foreign stakeholders, and coordinating this kind of machine is quite a challenge sometimes. What is important, though, I think, is that, and I guess this is my key message here today, is that due to the Russian aggression and its nature and its scale, unfortunately, there will be a lot of work for all of us for years to come. And probably there will be enough room and space for everyone to contribute to this whole task of bringing the children back to Ukraine. The coordination mechanisms, they are in place. The cooperation platforms are in place. What we probably all need to do is to scale things up, streamline communication among various actors. And as Mr. Dobrosedov rightfully mentioned, clearly delineate the roles and responsibilities, so when there is anyone who wants to contribute, he or she or organization has a clear understanding of who they should come to and who they should talk to. This is something that we are definitely going to work going forward, but I suppose that the events of this nature, of this kind, as organized by ICMP, where different stakeholders across the different sectors have the opportunity to listen to and talk to each other, I think they help, so thanks a lot for organizing that. And I'm sure that we'll be able to bring our cooperation forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxim. And now I would like to proceed to the next question. I will ask the question in Ukrainian and the answer will be in English. So we have raised the question of reintegration. How children that are coming back to Ukraine, that were forcibly detained, how they can be reintegrated into Ukrainian society. This is also a great challenge for Ukraine, because we didn't have and we still haven't built this system of reintegration. But I would like to ask this question to Mr. Weiss. So you have the experience of monitoring, caring for minor children in the federal court of the US when it comes to children of illegal migrants in the isolators near the border. So can this experience be useful to building the system of reintegration of Ukrainian children?
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here. I'm very grateful for the invitation to participate. For the last 5 years, I have served as the juvenile care monitor for the U.S. federal courts overseeing the treatment of migrant children in U.S. detention. In beginning fall of 2017, and then publicly announced in the spring of 2018, the Trump administration implemented what was called the zero tolerance policy, which separated children who came across the border as a family. Now, it was clearly set up as a deterrent for migrant families to come to the U.S. southern border. Approximately between 5,000 and 6,000 children were separated from families. The outrage that it created across all political ideologies in the United States was extreme. There was a federal court order. They needed to stop the program, reunite the children, but the political backlash was dramatic. And within 6 weeks of the public announcement of the zero tolerance program, the Trump administration rescinded it. However, there were still approximately 5,000 to 6,000 children who were separated. And the judge ordered that those kids be reunited with their families. The problem was that either through incompetence or functionally evil, they lost track of which kids belonged to which parents. That the system, the digital system for unaccompanied children to go into the shelter system was different than the Homeland Security law enforcement system. And therefore, they had a lot, approximately 4,000 young kids who couldn't identify who their parents were, that were completely disconnected from any information about their parents. This was a dramatic challenge, and DNA was quite important, particularly for the young kids, for the reunification of many of the children. However, the Biden administration comes in and in February of 2021 creates a task force for the remaining ununified children who remain separated. Approximately 2,200 were still not reunified with their families by the time the Biden administration has come in. And they have used DNA as well as other techniques to identify the families, and they continue to reunify families that have been separated in 2017 and 2018. So what are the lessons from this experience? Number one is that separating children from their parents should never again be used as an instrument of immigration policy. That cruelty to children should never be used as a deterrent to immigration, number one. But there was also a recognition that these kids and these families required enormous psychosocial support. And the Biden administration's task force has contracted with social service and psychological support agencies to provide all the families with ongoing support. It was also identified pretty early that there were still families that had hesitated to register as a separated family. And in fact, over the last 9 months, the task force has reported that there were 250 new cases reported that were separated back in 2017 and 2018. The lessons from this task force are that the psychosocial requirements of these families are profound and complex. However, it also has underscored the hidden disincentives to identifying yourself as a family with a separated child in complicated political and security environments. And it's going to be very important to recognize that identification, particularly the use of DNA, always requires trust. And therefore, efforts to link the technology to real-world situations at scale, and here we're talking at very large scale, will require the engagement of systems of care that have generally had such trust. And I'm suggesting that the healthcare systems and the doctors and nurses who take care of children in Ukraine could provide an important basis of enhanced support for the identification of children who have been taken, but also as a means of providing critical psychosocial support for the families. The requirements for psychosocial support, they do not start with reunification. They start with separation. And the families today require psychosocial support in ways that, in general, they are not receiving. And I should also mention that since February 2022, I've served as a senior advisor to the Safer Ukraine initiative, which is a consortium of clinicians, health systems, doctors and nurses in Ukraine, the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, and pediatric oncologists across Europe and North America, that was set up within 2 weeks and began evacuating children with cancer and related blood disorders, primarily to EU countries and facilities for advanced care. These are kids in active cancer therapy who were evacuated. And within 2 weeks of the intensified invasion in February of 2022, 150 kids with their caretakers were convoyed out of Ukraine to Poland to a triage center that was set up there and then sent on to advanced care facilities throughout Europe and North America. Since, I would say, the last year and a half, Safer Ukraine has shifted to strengthening and supporting the appropriate high-quality care delivered in Ukraine so that evacuation is not required. However, for certain kids, every week are being evacuated still for advanced care. And this lesson has been very important with the creation of a similar effort that has been evacuating children with catastrophic illness out of Gaza, primarily being transferred to Egypt, Jordan, and other facilities in the region. But it has also proven to me of how capable health systems can be in working for humanitarian causes that go far beyond the direct provision of clinical services. The Safer Ukraine initiative, that experience showed me just how powerful the Ukrainian health system can be with appropriate international cooperation and support. So my suggestion, and I think it's been shared in this discussion of way forward, is the creation of alliances, of consortia that cross disciplinary boundaries, that solidarity that cross disciplinary boundaries may be extremely important to the identification of the children that we're concerned about here, but also providing the services that they already require, their families already require now in Ukraine. That justice demands the identification and return of these children, clearly. But justice also demands the provision of essential services to help these families cope with the trauma that they are addressing now, but also ultimately to provide the services so that these kids can be successfully reintegrated into family life and to community life. That in the end, this kind of cross-disciplinary engagement will provide the best assurance that our programs, policies, and efforts prove both effective and just.
Thank you. Thank you very much also for the lessons learned, and thank you very much for your positions and ideas that we may use in order to develop our systems for the reintegration of the children returnees. And we're still left with 2 minutes. And once again, a question to Maxim. Given what Paul has just said, what would be the needs, Ukrainian needs in supporting the development of the reintegration system? Because it's important to find, identify, and return and reintegrate the children.
Yeah. With your permission, I would try to answer this question not only related to reintegration, but with regard to wider needs, because reintegration is critically important, of course, but also it's an element of the bigger kind of picture that needs to be taken into consideration. So I think that the first and foremost, what we need most is that for international community to apply pressure on Russia to make sure that the kids are returned back and make sure that we don't stop this pressure until kids are returned. At the moment, the pressure is not sufficient, and I think the numbers speak for itself. Other than that, we need support across all key areas of all key focus areas of the Bring Kids Back UA initiative, starting from locating, tracing, and identifying the abducted children, physically returning them home, providing them the necessary reintegration and rehabilitation support, and of course, ensuring that Russia is brought to justice and is held accountable. Now, I acknowledge that of course, it's not only that the financial support that is needed, but it's also about the expertise, the tools, the know-how, the technology. The demand is pretty serious. And at the very end, I know that there is a very diverse audience today. So I would like to probably finish with saying that if you are an expert, please do join the Bring Kids Back UA task force. If you represent a state that hasn't yet joined the international coalition, please make a case for your government to join. If your government has joined the coalition, then let's discuss and collaborate on the projects that we could implement together. And if you are still unsure on how you personally or your organization can contribute to the cause of bringing the children back home, then just reach out to us, to me personally, and I'm sure we'll find a great fit and match you with relevant partners and organizations. Of course, the challenge ahead of us is very difficult. The task is very difficult, but only together we can save thousands of young lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for this discussion. We started with the first panel discussion where we spoke about trust, and we are finishing with a similar message that Mr. Weiss said, trust. Trust is important. It's important to establish trust between us and the children returnees. It's important to have trust between the countries and organizations. So this is how we conclude the third panel. Thank you very much.
Hear me, I'll say it again. So we invite all the panelists, not the you're a panelist, Audie. Yeah. We'll have a pretty brief question and answer session that will be led by my colleague Goran Batic. Okay, Audie, take your seat. I think there's a chair for you.
I do not need a chair. Please go ahead.
Okay.
So thank you very much. We received some questions from the audience. The first question, it is also on the screen. The question is for Ms. Oksana Dmitrieva. And the question is, do you see evidence that children are deliberately separated from their parents in infiltration camps in order to deport the children to Russia? Are other cases like that prosecutors are looking at? Let's wait for the translation.
Yes, of course. The prosecutor is looking into such cases. So far, this is the pre-trial investigation phase. So it is important for us to keep some data and information confidential. But yes, it is clear that we're working on such facts and they're present, obviously.
Thank you. The next question was meant to go to Katerina Rashevska, but I believe she's departed to the airport, so maybe perhaps to Mariam, if you don't mind. And the question is, can you comment on the difference in your mind between reintegration and rehabilitation of returned children? What is the optimal approach in the interest of the child?
First of all, my first comment here, when I read rehabilitation, I'm a bit allergic to that word, because it's not about rehabilitation, but giving them a life back and integrating them into the society. I think this is very important because everybody talks about rehabilitation. And when you talk about reintegration, some children have been missing since 2014. So here we are talking about integration. It is very important when we return them, it's not to stigmatize them in a sense that to put them in all the same boarding school, for example, all the same places, because that will stigmatize those children, which will create some confusion also into the society. They will be suspicious for them. So it is very important to integrate them directly into the society within Ukraine. Did I answer the question really well?
I hope so. I hope so.
Sorry.
No, thank you. The next question is for panel 2. I imagine for Adi Adnan-Rizvic. How do you handle the strong privacy legislation in the Netherlands? I imagine this is in relation to data protection.
Yeah, okay. ICMP has diplomatic status in the Netherlands according to the whole state agreement, meaning that the data which ICMP has in possession is pretty much protected. And wherever ICMP is working, of course, our servers and our data is legally protected, you know, meaning it's a kind of institutional protection. But the more important thing here is that when we are doing the data collection, we already have in the mind, you know, how to protect the data in the way that we embedded the technical protections, which are also very, very, very important.
Thank you, Adi. The next question is from Mr. Vitaly Kasab, but I'm not sure whether we still have our online speakers with us. But nonetheless, I will pose the question. And the question is, it was sort of addressed several times, but I'll read it nonetheless. How can coordination be ensured for outreach and data collection efforts to encourage families of missing, deported, and detained children to provide reference samples, considering the plans of the National Police of Ukraine, the Commissioner of Persons Missing, Magnolia, DNA Bridge, and ICMP? So the question is for Mr. Vitaly Kasab, but again, maybe the crew can confirm if they're still online, and that's a no. Perhaps, if no takers for this question, I think it's good that it is on the screen, because I imagine this is one of the key issues that was already addressed several times during the discussion today.
If I may to jump in.
Please, please.
You know. I believe it was discussed during these roundtables here that the key word here will be coordination on all of these efforts, you know, and not necessarily only to speed up the process of locating and and finding these kids, but on the same moment to avoid the redundancy of any kind of the data, because without the coordination, without the proper let's say, communication between the different partners, different players here, you know, unfortunately, I believe that a lot of work will be redundant. And that's something which we need to think about very carefully and try to prevent it's happening. The other part why coordination is needed is, that's also something I believe I mentioned, that all of us are collecting maybe just small pieces of the data, which has its own importance only in the case that we have a glue to connect those pieces in the picture. And some coordination is a glue. Cooperation is a glue. Those are the key words.
It's extremely impressive, the efforts that have been going on and the protections in place. I've worked in a lot of complicated political and security environments. And usually in complicated security situations, people don't want to be on any list. It's a threat at some level. And it may be useful to engage groups working on the ground directly with these families to try to identify what are, in fact, the disincentives for coming forward with the appropriate information or participating in a DNA database development, because almost always the disincentives are there, and they're usually hidden, and you don't really know until you ask, and ask deeply by people who are trusted by the families involved.
Thank you. The final question from the audience through the QR modality is the following. Can we have the question on the screen, please? It is for Mariam again. How would you assess cooperation between civil society and state institutions in Ukraine with regards to addressing the issue of missing, deported and detained children? How could it be improved?
Вирішення питання зниклих безвісти дітей.
I'm no one to assess the situation because my country is not at war. But as Maxime from Bring Kids Back mentioned, Ukraine is fighting on different aspects. And unfortunately, the missing children and deportation is one of the aspects. And there is always room for improvement, even when a country is not at war. So you can imagine in Ukraine. But I think, yeah, everything has been said today. More cooperation and, of course, active communication, I think, is the best. But having said that, they have done already a lot despite the situation. But it could be improved, of course.
Thank you, Mariam, very much. We do have still some time for our questions from the audience, perhaps one more. So if there are any individuals with a question, if not, then I would hand over the mic back to Catherine. Perfect.
Thank you, Goran. And I'm going to hand over the mic to our final speaker, our dear chair, Ambassador Knut Vollebæk, please, to make closing remarks.
I don't need translation to listen to myself anyway, so I can remove that. No, I could stand somewhere here, and you can be my. I can give you my speech after when I finish this sheet of paper. I know that you all are waiting for the reception, so I should be fairly short. But I think it is important to sum this up because it has been a real great evening. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, this has been very moving, touching, and significant as far as I can feel it and see it. And I would like to thank all of you for coming. Of course, specifically those of you who are here that have participated in the panels and those who have left us from the screen, because you have contributed very significantly, and also from the various organizations and governments that have been present here. And Catherine, I also need to thank you and your staff, because I know that this has been a heavy burden on you, and you have done a marvelous job, and so thank you for making this possible. And I think there have been a lot of significant things said, but some of the most significant for me has been the okay, you see the service is coming. There is no end to what you can do for me. You're useless. I'm sorry, you're not useless, but I don't need you just now. That's very different, huh? Okay, I'll step down and be a lover. Thank you very much. It's easier. No, but we have heard a lot about sharing stories and experiences. And it always helps, particularly for those of us who are not in the midst of the events, that we can realize what is happening and what is touching and important for all of you. I think it was quite significant also that one of the panelists, I think it was on the second panel, he had to excuse himself because there was an air raid alert. And well, of course, he doesn't need to excuse himself. I think there are other people that should excuse themselves. But it was almost like scripted that but he said we'll continue working. And I think that is the stamina that you see from a lot of these people. I believe it's also fair to say that the attendance at this conference reflects the very wide and diverse range of stakeholders whose active and coordinated, that we have heard about, participation will be key to developing an effective Ukrainian missing persons process. In order to address a complex challenge, multiple disciplines and multiple strategies will come into play, namely expertise from all over the world can be harnessed to support Ukrainian experts who are faced with the enormous technical challenge of mounting an effective DNA-led process in the middle of a war that we have heard about. Diplomatic support can assist the efforts of Ukrainian government agencies that are responsible for sustaining this process. By providing practical assistance, international organizations can express solidarity for Ukrainian families of the missing in a way that is useful and that is much more than simply symbolic. And Ukrainian civil society can and must be supported in developing a leading role in a process that will secure truth, justice, and reparations for families of the missing. The strategy must have the agreement and understanding of all the relevant institutions and the active support of the families missing. Targeted and constructive discussion of key issues is an essential step in building necessary consensus. I believe we have come a long way from this conference, and we can move on further with greater clarity about the steps that must be taken. And these include creating a unified strategic vision to find the huge number of missing persons, including enhanced cooperation among Ukrainian institutions and communication with families of the missing. We have heard this repeated several times today. Ensuring that the needs and rights of families of the missing are front and center of all efforts. Helping to develop the technical capacity of Ukrainian forensic and investigative personnel to engage in a DNA-led process of identification that incorporates advanced forensic investigation capabilities. Supporting and enhancing the meaningful participation of civil society. Raising public awareness about the missing persons issue and the steps that are being taken to address it, including an educational outreach campaign for families of the missing, and strengthening Ukraine's institutional capacity and the legislative framework to account effectively for missing persons. I would like, once again, as was said at the outset of this afternoon's event, to thank the European Union and the governments of Canada, the Czech Republic, Luxembourg, Germany, the Netherlands, Slovakia, the United States, and my own country, Norway, for their support for ICMP's Ukraine program. And I would like to thank all of you for your participation in today's conference, particularly the people behind my back. A report on the key elements discussed at this roundtable events will be distributed in due course. And I wish all of us good luck, stamina, courage in our further endeavors in something that is extremely important for Ukraine, but as we have heard, for a number of countries, and I think it is for peace in the world. Thank you.